I've watched Raccoon City die 5 times. In 1999, Resident Evil 3 dropped the first bomb. 2003's Resident Evil Outbreak gave us a crew that narrowly escaped the blast. Outbreak 2 then dropped in 2005, following an alternate tale with that same crew but ending with that same explosion. The Umbrella Chronicles arrived in 2007 with a refreshed version of The Fall of the City, and in 2020, Resident Evil 3 Remake blew it all to hell all over again. The series is full of cataclysmic events. In 2012, a city was wiped off the map by a space laser and a suburban town was nuked again by the United States government. But Resident Evil always comes back to Raccoon City. It's addicted to it. Some of the CGI movies even use its legacy as plot points, and that means it's hard to feel like these games and this story will ever completely close the book on it. So, along comes Resident Evil 9 Requiem, pitching itself as just that. It's a spectacular, harrowing descent into a new iconic location. Its monsters chew the scenery, bringing a fresh perspective to how we see zombies of old. It experiments with new mechanics and systems in a way that leads to constant emergent horror that boils your blood. Its handling of tension and catharsis is brooding and explosive, and it regularly reminds the player just how good this series can be when it leans into the haunting stickiness of its terror. And then you get to the second half. Requiem is Resi's 30th anniversary game, and boy does it know it. Almost all of its fantastic ideas evaporate the second it returns to Raccoon City. It drowns in references of days gone by, introduces cynical walking mystery boxes that end up being completely underwhelming, soaps itself up with retcons, weird omissions, bland world design, and an ending that beats with a good idea, but that beat turns into a frustrating dirge for longtime fans, and a confusing shrug for newcomers. But I am acutely aware that I am alone in feeling this way. For example, when Tariq Musa reviewed the game for The Verge, he wrote, "Resident Evil has shown that it can be many types of horror, and Requiem proves that the series can pull it all off in one single experience. Explain yourself, Tariq."
I like the game, Monty, okay?
I'm glad people loved this game. I'm not here to screech that the world is wrong, but I don't think Requiem does pull it all off in one single experience. It's a tale of two cities, and unfortunately when the game returns to the city that started it all, it tumbles from heights that it climbed to in the hours prior, over-relying on Easter eggs and references to break its fall. So, let's watch Raccoon City die one more time. This is a commentary and critique of Resident Evil Requiem. Grace Ashcroft is cursed. Long before the events of Resident Evil Requiem, her life has already been shaped by a tragedy outside of her control, and that tragedy soon spirals into generational trauma. She's a gothic protagonist in a modern-day story, and a perfect frame to hang Requiem's obsession with the past. A terrible FBI analyst that's behind in her workload and too traumatized to be effective in the field. Her meekness, anxiety, and introversion sets her up for failure when the horror comes, and thankfully for us, her boss, Nathan Dempsey, ignores all those warning signs when he sends her alone to the Wrenwood Hotel. It's where her mother was killed 8 years prior.
Perhaps it's time for you to face the past. Confront that fear head on.
It's suspicious, and in hindsight it seems like Dempsey is corrupt, sending Grace into a lion's den specifically prepared for her without backup. It turns out that, like much of the game's story, his suspicious behavior is just happenstance. He's as much a victim of our villain's maneuvering as Grace is. In gothic fiction, crimes, secrets, and tragedies settle into the walls, lingering long after the people involved are gone. The Wrenwood Hotel fits neatly into this tradition. It's a place defined by an unresolved past. The site of Alyssa Ashcroft's strange assassination, and a place is called out to Grace, summoning her through her work like Eleanor Vance and Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Dead people have been appearing all across the country. Once survivors of the Raccoon City incident, time has caught up to all of them. Raccoon City Syndrome. The T-virus they were exposed to decades ago has laid dormant for years. Prior vaccines like Outbreak's Daylight just put the infection on pause. For longtime fans, there's just one name in Grace's report that we recognize: Michael Warren, Raccoon's corrupt mayor. Another body has been found in Wrenwood. It's a town just a few miles east of Raccoon, pitched as a pastiche city full of nostalgia for a bygone era, but locked in today's prices. It costs $50 for a haircut here. Well, at least they accept Viwa. Renwood is just the prologue, but it's the game's feeling in a location. By sending Grace back here, Resident Evil Requiem places her in the role of what Gothic historians might call the inheritor of the curse. It's someone forced to confront the consequences of a tragedy that began in the previous generation. Grace isn't just investigating a series of mysterious deaths, she's stepping into a mystery her mother never solved. The truth that led to that murder was never uncovered, and the hotel has remained a monument to an unfinished story. It's a slow, brooding opening, thick and musty, setting the game up as a conspiracy to be unraveled. Unlike with, say, Alan Wake 2, Grace's abilities as a forensic analyst are never mechanical. She doesn't analyze anything in Renwood because our villains won't let her. A path has been paved. Breadcrumbs on a trail that leads to a fateful planned meeting. The hotel is made to feel personal to her. A photograph is pinned to the bar, just handing out a key, something we would typically need to hunt for. A picture of her has been blown up and hung in a frame. These are delicate acts, not there to scare her, but to welcome her. It does very little to change her state of mind. Before the player even encounters the game's monsters, the hotel establishes something fundamental about the world of Resident Evil. The past here is never truly buried. It lingers in places, in the institutions and lives of the people who inherit its consequences. Grace may not have chosen this story, but the moment she pushes past that police tape and drinks in the hotel, it's clear she's been part of it all along. Just look at who her mother is.
Grace, please know that you are my hope. Never forget that.
What are you talking about?
I love you.
Alyssa Ashcroft, Raccoon City survivor, co-master of lockpicking, and one of the playable characters in Resident Evil Outbreak. An investigative journalist who was instrumental in the downfall of Umbrella while spouting some of the dumbest lines in a series full of very dumb lines. This is some silly shit. It sure is, pal. Years after the bomb fell, she's turned into a desperate woman on the run. 8 years ago, she brought Grace to Renwood because she believed someone was trying to track them down. She was right, and paid the price for it. Alyssa's death scars Grace, trauma that's reduced her to an anxious mess. She was the one who confirmed they were at the hotel. It was an accident, but guilt warps tragedy into responsibility. We see that she was far more assertive under Alyssa's care. In the time since, she's developed a mumble and a stutter. Her actor, Angela Santalbano, embeds that trauma into her performance as Grace. The mumble and stutter make her endearing. When she interacts with others, she doesn't make eye contact. She catastrophizes. Later, when she's wandering the Rhodes Hill Care Center, she immediately assumes she won't be able to escape. Everyone roots for an underdog, even if it starts so high here at the hotel that she has nowhere to go when things really kick off. It seems that was down to direction. Angela told PC Games N,
"We would turn off all light in the studio, and we would only operate by flashlight or camera light on our head. I think Capcom was very good at trying to make the situation feel as close to what it was without, having a real-life zombie running at you."
Why her mother was killed is a mystery for now, but before she was, she hid a memory disc behind a painting in the lobby. Chekhov's Interview, a piece of the past waiting to explode in the present. What's on that disc won't be revealed until the game's closing minutes, but it retroactively mutates the history of the franchise in ways that are messy, convoluted, and dissatisfying. Even for Resident Evil. Grace inherits the consequences of Umbrella, something that becomes symbolic when we meet our first zombie. He's infected with a special new strain of their T-virus. We watch as he transforms in real time, teeth peeling out of his gums. His haunting, crackling gasps are the calm before a messy storm of violence. The first monster in Requiem isn't some elaborate new bioweapon, it's the most familiar horror in the entire series. A zombie. A relic of Umbrella's experiments, a reminder that the catastrophe that destroyed Raccoon City never really ended. The curse Grace inherited is standing right in front of her. She's part of it now. It even bites her. All of our main characters are cursed in more explicit ways, but generational trauma isn't exclusive to Grace. Leon Kennedy and Sherry Birkin are infected by RCS, textually called Umbrella's curse. Emily is a victim of Umbrella, a company that crumbled and died over 20 years ago, and Zeno is a clone of a legacy Resident Evil character. Probably. Maybe. We'll talk about him later, that guy's a mess. Victor Gideon, our villain, has fallen to madness, trying to find purpose in notes from the past. He waits patiently at the top of the hotel.
I know now that you're the one that I've been searching for. The special one. The chosen one. Miss Ashcroft.
He was the one who ordered Alyssa's murder all those years ago, and a hulking figure regardless of who's in shot with him. The snakeskin jacket, the forked tongue, the snake eye ring, the slithering scar that runs up his middle, and the jewelry adorned with snakes scream a future transformation. His visual design and excellent control of every scene set him as a harbinger of narrative tension. What will he turn into? All signs point to a monstrous serpent. Can't wait for that to happen. Gothic stories typically follow three structural beats. A past crime occurs, time passes, and the buried past resurfaces. Jane Eyre, The Fall of the House of Usher, Wuthering Heights are just three examples that come to mind. The Wrenwood Hotel serves that structure in a tight 30 minutes. It's the place where Grace's trauma finally resurfaces. Alyssa's murder, the investigation into Umbrella, and the infection that never really disappeared. Every thread of the past has been waiting here, quietly, for someone to come back and pull on it. Our opening wants to leave us with one clear impression. The evil didn't end with Raccoon City. It simply went dormant, waiting decades to surface inside the people who survived it, and the children who inherited it. So, let's see how Leon is dealing with that. With the exception of Resident Evil Survivor, Resi has never limited itself to just one playable character. Sometimes that's part of the pitch. Claire and Leon, Chris and Sheva. Other times, it's treated as a narrative twist. Barry in Revelations 2, Mia in Resident Evil 7. Often, it's part of the conversation these games have with themselves. A meditative catch and release, tension and catharsis. It's not always handled well. For example, Machine Gun Carlos struggles to feel distinct in Resident Evil 3 Remake because Jill's gameplay is so explosive already. But Resident Evil 4's Ashley section shows her helplessness compared to Leon's quipping and suplexes. Requiem follows tradition, and it fuels its tension.
Leon, what's your sit rep?
I'm going after Victor.
Leon is heaven sent to Grace's hell, introduced by single-handedly stopping a zombie outbreak in Wrenwood. After Raccoon and Tall Oaks, it shows just how capable he is without being obnoxious like in Resident Evil 6's opening. He's here to investigate a murder too. Sherry Birkin, our voice in the ear, says that Victor Gideon is a person of interest, and hey, would you look at that, he's right across the street, that's lucky. Requiem meditates on its tension a lot in its first half. If Grace is focused on the slow burn, Leon brings the carnage. Catharsis in horror is only as good as the tension that preceded it, but Requiem also understands that there is another side to that when it comes to a Resident Evil game. If paced right, is structured to mathematical precision, the loud, bombastic parts can complement the tension. Even back in 1996, when action-packed moments were tempered by fixed camera angles and a control scheme full of friction, the first Resident Evil understood this with its larger-than-life boss fights. Taking down a huge monster or a man-eating plant was a rush. It acted as a reprieve from a core gameplay loop that was slow, methodical, and puzzling. With that in mind, how exactly does Requiem handle it? For the first half of the game, Leon's sequences are vignettes, action-packed power fantasies that completely contrast Grace's side of the story. Her sections are meaty and dense, with intricate level design and backtracking. Leon's are linear and gung-ho, focusing on a variety of scenarios. Grace shrieks in terror as she runs through dark hallways. Leon sighs exhaustedly when a nurse monologues about secret experiments. Resource management carries between his sections, grounding them so they don't feel too gimmicky. In his video, The Resident Evil Game They Keep Remaking, Lamhoot argued that Resident Evil Revelations 2 is the underrated, undervalued framework for a lot of modern Resi. Slicing the meat from its bones and shoving them into new, flashy titles and remakes to trick people into thinking the series has innovated. Requiem fucking loves Revelations 2, almost as much as Lamhoot does. There you would play through a full section as Claire Redfield for a couple of hours, and then cut ahead to Barry Burton 6 months later. He would re-explore those areas with new firepower and distinct changes. Those changes were dependent on gameplay choices made as Claire and was a consistent through line the whole game. If she didn't kill a monster, it would still be roaming, mutated, waiting for Barry. In interviews and previews, Capcom talked a lot about how Requiem would treat Grace and Leon like this. Your choices in one section would impact another. Any monsters Grace left alive would be waiting for Leon. The game does introduce that idea in the care center, but it's optional, lasts 5 minutes, and was frankly overblown by marketing, Capcom, and reviewers. The reality is that this happens once, the care center. We swap between the two again in the arc, but Grace's gameplay has no bearing on what Leon faces, and it's over before it begins. Focusing just on Rhodes Hill, Leon's path takes him through 4 rooms. He can ignore anything that Grace left behind. If he shared this over a pint, Barry would laugh in his face. The question is, why would he ignore anything? The power fantasy is too addictive to ignore because the tension has been handcrafted. Grace doesn't set up challenges for Leon, she leaves behind victims for him to clean up. After hours of being on the back foot, creeping around brutal monsters like the chef, Leon's shotgun brings some much needed release. These moments work for 2 reasons. They piggyback off Grace's terror, and they're short. They offer security and safety, and having that ripped away from us when we're thrown back to Grace shows the seismic difference in their abilities.
What is this? Hey! Help!
Gideon knocked Grace out and brought her here, the Rhodes Hill Care Center, his domain. She shoots awake near the nurse's station, drained of her blood. Gideon has been experimenting on her. Thankfully, he didn't get rid of her Hamilton watch. She wriggles free and makes a plan to escape, but something else is in here, and it wants to play. Leon's catharsis would only be powerful if Grace's tension was fit to burst, and the game relies on an incredible approach to atmosphere and some old mechanical tricks to pull it off. Requiem wants to stress you out, it revels in it, and what better way to do that than reintroduce its most famous stress mechanic. Ink ribbons are now an option in the menu, not hidden behind insane difficulty modes. You can find a handful of them in the care center, but if you want to save reliably, you need to use up resources to craft them. That pressure elongates every run between save rooms, stretching the tension before the game finally snaps it with Leon's autosaving. There are long, ominous periods where we don't see a single monster, so the game leaks paranoia. Back in the hotel, there was no combat whatsoever, no zombies shambling out of bathrooms, but Grace had a handgun from the offset. It made us think that we might come across something. Why else would the game arm us? It's frugal with its weaponry too. When Grace gets Leon's monster-killing magnum, the Requiem, it has just 1 bullet in it. Relief appears and disappears. Later, after being robbed of her pistol, she finally finds a handgun in the care center's dining room. Thank God, but shit, there's no bullets. Don't worry though, there's ammo in the next room, but damn it, one of the zombies have to see you if you want to grab them. Silence returns as an important part of the soundscape too. Grace's sections melt into ambient noise and back out into stony, isolating quiet. Those sounds were captured across 12 channels, including vertical positioning. It's something that enhances those special beats where the game reminds you, consistently, just how alone you are. When a whistling wind fades away or the crooning, rarely used save theme disappears, all you hear are her footsteps or panicked breathing and the occasional sounds of slobbering. If ambience does appear, it's all purposeful. Pinpointed sounds connect with activity so you know to pay attention to every creak and groan. Darkness is used tastefully. It's not everywhere, but when it arrives, it's oppressive, something to conquer. You push through a door, not knowing what to expect, ready to discover a new space, and what you're met with is inky blackness. Here, as we sneak away from this game's pursuer, the girl, Grace will get a lighter for a short section, and the flickering flame just tickles the shadows, it doesn't penetrate them. Light sources are a choice. Unlike with Resident Evil 7, the game doesn't take control away from you on how a space is lit. The lighter and torch become tools that bring risk and reward. It makes it easier for zombies to see you because some of Requiem's monsters have acute hearing and eyesight. Switches and lamps can be turned on to illuminate a room, something that becomes mechanical because the girl is burned by it. This isn't a one-off moment. In the care center's basement, a whole gameplay sequence revolves around light. We need to juggle fuses between different parts while managing zombies and the girl. If we shoot a zombie in our way, the loud bang will summon her. There is a particular mad scramble in the collection pool where a zombie is standing next to the console we need to use if we want to turn on the lights. We have to kill it quickly and shove the fuses in before the girl reaches us. It's a frenetic sequence, it's part of that special Resident Evil feeling. Its horrifying bits aren't purely focused on an atmosphere that smothers. Often, there are small, explosive, panicky bursts. But it isn't all elastic design. Following Alyssa dangles between gameplay, controlled first-person cutscenes, and a third-person perspective. That's because the game offers a new level of freedom for how we approach its camera. For the first time, we can hop between first and third person at will, regardless of who we're playing as. That was an option eventually bolted into Resident Evil Village, but it wasn't as detailed as it is here. For example, Grace stumbles when she's being chased. That ability to switch means the cutscenes flit between the two views to try and keep up a sense of consistency. Sometimes, though, it just reinforces that we are an observer, not a participant. Our first zombie encounter is especially guilty of this. He's a scripted threat, not an active one. If you play this sequence in third person, the game suddenly slaps the camera into Grace's head as she tries to rip her sleeve off the trolley and frantically wave a poker around. Control is torn away. These moments are few and far between in the rest of the game, which is why it stands out. A necessary evil because Capcom wanted to emphasize player freedom by letting us swap perspectives. The alternative would be making two versions of every cutscene.
So how long have you worked for, Dr. Gideon?
Not long. I just recently joined the team.
Leon follows Grace's trail to Rhodes Hill. Victor Gideon is expecting him. The game wastes no time in letting him cut loose because Grace's section was so tense and vulnerable. She's the new generation, overwhelmed by Umbrella's legacy. Leon is the old guard. In Resident Evil 4, he completed his transition from victim to survivor. In Resident Evil 6, he transformed from survivor to action hero. In Requiem, he is a predator. Nobody told him to come to Rhodes. He's on the hunt. It's heavily implied that he and Sherry are investigating off-book. And that is why the chainsaw is so important. In RE4, Leon contained both halves of the tension catharsis cycle. He was both a victim of the horror, seen through the foreboding atmosphere of the village, or later with the regenerators, and the engine of action. Roundhouse kicks, quips, minecart rides. In Requiem, that cycle is externalized because Grace brings the fear. She embodies the building of pressure, and he embodies the roar of release. The chainsaw-wielding maniac ties a neat bow around that evolution. It's a weapon that's appeared in every Resi game since 4. RE6 had a meat one growing out of a zombie. 7 had a full boss fight around it. Village strapped it to a mech, but remember Ethan, stay under the radar! In Leon's adventures, the chainsaw brought panic, but now it brings splatterhouse satisfaction that is driven by the player. We can pick it up and swing it around blindly. If it clatters to the floor, it'll whiz around threatening to hurt us or zombies. Sometimes it'll get stuck in a monster, so they become a trap to avoid and a boon that slashes other zombies. The depth gives Leon's confidence gravitas. For a few glorious minutes, the player becomes the thing that used to terrify them. It is pure Resident Evil catharsis. Zombies are mulch, but crucially, it doesn't last. The chainsaw sequence burns fast and bright. It's loud, excessive, and deliberately temporary. The weapon breaks and the game moves on. Requiem's first half, notice my emphasis on first half, understands something Resi 5 and 6 never did. Catharsis in horror only works if it's fleeting. If Leon stayed this powerful for too long, the tension would collapse entirely. The fear that fuels Grace's story would evaporate. So, the game resets the pressure.
I'm Grace, Ashcroft, FBI.
FBI? What are you doing here?
Someone kidnapped me.
Victor Gideon.
I don't know.
Even though Leon saves Grace from the girl, the two are separated before they can finish introductions. He's knocked out cold by Victor Gideon, and when we return to playing as Grace, the silence feels heavier than ever. Stretch, snap, reset. Resident Evil has been playing that rhythm for nearly 30 years, but Requiem's first half might be the cleanest distillation of it yet. Grace brings the fear. Leon lets you enjoy it. Why are hospitals a horror trope? Spencer Memorial, Brookhaven, Mount Massive, Alchemilla. Hell, in Romeo's A Dead Man is used as a setting to parody survival horror. Why have they appeared so many times? I'd argue it's because hospitals lend so easily to the warping of a space that should be intrinsically good. Classic hospital imagery lends to horror so smoothly that a writer, director, or game designer barely needs to change anything. Faceless workers, surgical tools, operating tables. Here, blood leaves the body, organs are packed into boxes, and viral infections eat you from the inside. You don't need to watch Saw to see this stuff. All you have to do is wander into your local practice. Add a tangle of gothicism and that special Resident Evil magical realism, and you've got a horror location set to enchant. Welcome to the Rhodes Hill Care Center. We've been expecting you.
Is someone there? Oh, I'm sorry if I surprised you.
A little girl is locked in a cell just off from the save room. Emily. She's blind, out of touch with her feelings in a way that implies she's never known a world outside of this room. A quick scour of the environment tells us that her cellmate, Marie, has turned into the girl. What were the staff doing here? Is she destined to transform as well? Rhodes drowns in environmental storytelling. It lathers itself in a mythical aesthetic and buckets of blood, characterized by Victor Gideon's obsessive lunacy. All the doctors and nurses are in on the cruelty. This isn't like the Spencer Memorial Hospital in Resident Evil 3 Remake, where there's a seedy underbelly the general staff didn't know about. The care facility is too intimate, and the experiments are too purposeful for anyone not to have known. A public elevator leads straight down to a meat grinder. The rear exit is locked behind a bizarre contraption that requires keys buried by puzzles. The courtyard's walls tower. Better to keep intruders out and to lock the patients in. It's why I am totally fine with Leon lazily watching this nurse get chopped up. She had it coming. Gideon's life's work has been all in service of tracking down Elpis, the last creation of Umbrella's founder and all-time monster, Oswell E. Spencer. Elpis is, in fact, what series producer Jun Takeuchi mentioned during interviews following Resident Evil 5's release. He described Resi 5 as the moment where Pandora's box opened in the Resident Evil universe, and he flagged that, as the story goes, the last thing in the box is Elpis. Hope. The title of my Resi 6 video is aged beautifully. Because Gideon's obsessed with finding Elpis, that obsession seems to have transferred to many myths of old. This is his domain, so legendary creatures are wrapped up in the visual design. Cherubs are on doors that lead to save rooms. A statue of death riding on his horse ominously guards the main portion of the center. We're watched sadly by water nymphs built into the walls. Puzzles revolve around engraved unicorns and the relationship between the moon, sun, and stars. There's a missed opportunity here to tell us Pandora's story through our exploration. Perhaps it could have been tied to a puzzle. It would have acted as crucial foreshadowing for the game's big twist. Without it, as we'll later see, it feels like an ass pull. Even though it's just an aesthetic, that emphasis on myths introduces that crucial, fantastical element to Requiem's world design. Umbrella was built on a foundation of magical thinking. Spencer wanted to become an immortal god, powered by a eugenicist's wet dream. In the modern era, we learn that his inspiration for this came from time spent in the Season of the Witch, Mother Miranda. His madness spread through Umbrella and leaked into his zealots. Victor Gideon embodies all of that, and it's beautifully stained the look and feel of his setting. In some places, the wild and wonderful are even mechanical. In the parlor is a roulette table. If you shoot a number on that table and the ball rolls into it, you get a reward. The scientific angle is spread to the east wing, where the colors are a clinical blue and white, dripping with violent red lighting and traditional hospital assets. The West Wing isn't for the patients, it's for Gideon's many deranged visitors, government officials, or leading figures in our new evil organization, The Connections. A piano bar where patients entertained bigwigs. Why else would the singer be there? A huge, decorated dining room lathered with meat and fruit. A gambling space where senior management entertained investors, suspiciously locked behind a puzzle. That segregation shows that Rhodes Hill was corrupt regardless of the experiments. It's a care facility where the director has a lounge attached to his office, but we don't see bedrooms for the patients. They were all crammed into tight cells until they were needed, out of sight and out of mind. The luscious parts intrude on the clinical parts, not the other way around. When Grace woke in the nurse's station, strapped to a gurney and drained of her blood, the center of that room was dedicated to a plush leather armchair with a dinky ornate table next to it. Gideon sat in this chair, drank wine, daydreamed, watching Grace as she dangled, unconscious mere meters from him. That's just as chilling as flickering lights or shrieking monsters. Rhodes Hill understands that quiet can be just as unnerving as the loud.
Miss Ashcroft, come in. I won't harm you. I was just looking for Dr. Richardson.
Suspiciously, Gideon is unbothered by Grace's freedom. When she stumbles across him on the second floor, his patience dominates the scene. He tells her his master made her who she is, an apparent connection to Oswell Spencer that excites him. When he asks her if she'd like to see what's hidden under his hood, if she'd like to learn more about his experiments, he legitimately thinks that she would, and her horror baffles him. In a fresh turn for Resident Evil, he approaches our hero with reverence. He claims he doesn't want to hurt her, she's special. Traditionally, all of Resi's monsters have believed they're the main character of their story. Wesker works to his own ends. Irons believes the Raccoon City outbreak was just for him. Nikolai operated on his own rules, and so on. Victor is not the main character, and he bathes in that position. He's happy to work and live in Spencer's shadow, and by extension, Grace's. He sees himself as a catalyst that will help her fulfill her potential. That might explain why he's happy for her to solve all of his puzzles. Resident Evil is at its best when it locks us in a big, horror escape house. It's what creates its most iconic locations, its most organic scares, and that all-important sense of accomplishment that makes its tension ebb and flow. It's why the best Resident Evil 1 is built exclusively around that structure. You might disagree with that ranking, and that's cool, we've all been wrong in our life. Sometimes Requiem's puzzles are contained. Blood analysis sequences, cracking safes, unlocking the double helix in Gideon's office to unlock a secret elevator. How many secret rooms does this guy need? But most of the time, those contained puzzles link to other puzzles, so they beautifully domino. Everything boils down to key hunting, but crucially, that hunt has stages and layers. An electronic wristband is eventually needed to free Emily from her cell. To get that, you need to put 2 artificial organs into a corpse. To find the heart, you need to find a wrench that unlocks a walk-in freezer, and then to find the lungs, you need to find corrosive for a padlock, piece together the combination to an antique cabinet by examining photos, read Gideon's journal inside, unlock the garage, find an icebox, use the information from Gideon's journal to unlock the combination on that icebox, and then kill a zombie because that corpse bursts into life and the wristband you need is on its wrist. We are so back! The entire terrifying sequence in the basement involves a litany of steps. It's effectively one big puzzle box set piece in the dark where you need to map the area, find cranks, keys, and fuses, swap the direction of a corpse conveyor, all while you're hunted by the girl. The game is at its absolute best when it uses puzzle design as a platform for the horror. You grow your hero by letting them learn, understand, and conquer a space through the puzzles. You keep your player on their toes by introducing new scares to areas you previously thought had been handled. Rhodes Hill takes that important structure and runs with it, coming full circle when we rescue Emily.
I'd like you to come with me. Why?
The final piece we need to escape is inexplicably locked behind 3 braille dials. Grace, being a harbinger of hope, looks past Emily's blind spooky girl red flags and frees her, asking for her help to solve it. There's a lovely beat that further characterizes Grace where, despite the horror roaming the halls outside, she takes a moment to ask Emily if it's okay if she comes into her cell. It parallels Claire Redfield's saving Sherry Birkin all those years ago, set up for a gut punch at the halfway point. The path from here to the puzzle is full of zombies, so while we sneak by them, let's talk about how the care center is made to feel dangerous. The monsters define the space, but the devil's in the details. Take the director's office. When we enter, a male zombie is pawing at a female corpse. This new breed of zombies retain some of their memories, doomed to repeat their last moments over and over again. If we check the corpse's body, we see his slime and drool has stained her skirt. That little scene does more than provide a grotesque visual. It establishes a pattern. Rhodes Hill had monsters before the zombies. This place is dangerous, not just because monsters exist here, but because the building itself encouraged them. The infected are positioned like actors repeating a performance, frozen in routines, stuck in rooms that reflect whatever horror happened there before Grace arrived. The longer you explore, the more it feels like the care center is replaying its own trauma on a loop. The unfortunately named Chunk fills a unique role as Grace and Emily head on to the rail puzzle. His sheer size means he blocks off pathways completely, you can't just push past him. He is both a monster to kill and a trap to circumvent, and he's not alone in that characterization. In the garage, a construction worker zombie sits behind the controls of a digger. It's absurd at first, almost slapstick, until you realize the implication. Some fragment of muscle memory remains. The infection hasn't erased the worker's job, just twisted it into something lethal. Because the monsters become the traps, they're psychologically tied to Rhodes Hill. Take the processing room in the basement. This is the only trap in the game that feels like a traditional trap, a non-sentient space trying to eat you. A conveyor belt slowly drags bodies toward a grinding mechanism and Grace gets stuck on it. What makes this trap threatening though isn't the grinder, it's the infected that are slouching toward Grace, threatening to bite her or, if handled poorly, shove her into that trap. It's a grisly industrial solution to disposing of failed experiments. It wasn't built for Grace. It's just a system functioning exactly as intended. And the girl drags Emily into the heart of it.
You're an investigator, right? We'll investigate. What do you want to know?
Deep in the facility, Leon has been captured by Victor Gideon, but in reality, the mad scientist is the one being interrogated. He welcomes it. He openly tells Leon to ask questions, but our hero doesn't even bother. He's not interested in the answers Gideon gives because he assumes, rightfully, that it's the same megalomaniacal bullshit he spent years fighting. Gideon is so crazy that his answers are all poetic, vague monologues, and yet somehow, he's winning this conversation. Meanwhile, Grace is having a terrible time. The girl's lair is in the depths of Rhodes Hill and it's a mechanical, whirring blood factory. Rescuing Emily is a test of everything we've learned so far, so what better time to talk about how Grace plays? She fights smart, not hard. You can run blindly from room to room, sure, but that's not where the fun or the efficacy lies. Numerous systems are working against you to make her feel weak and vulnerable, so taking things slow, planning ahead, and thinking tactically is how she succeeds. She's an analyst, not a secret agent, so get analyzing, player. The environments might be terrifying, but they're also an asset. For example, the blood processor is a trap that can become a weapon, but if you drink in your surroundings, other parts of Rhodes Hill can be too. The blind zombie hates having his personal space invaded, so if an infected wanders into his path, he'll kill it. In the upcoming lab, we can find tanks full of hemolytic poison that melts monsters away. This is the most empowered Grace feels all game. Here, in the basement, we can lead zombies into electrified water and, more importantly, juggle the fuses we find to light safe spots where the girl leaves us alone. That's overcoming the horror right there, looking past the fear and understanding how it works. And Requiem's elasticity is what makes it all feel cohesive. Thank God these options are here too, because without that tactical thinking, Grace is so underpowered that she makes Ethan Winters look like Ash Williams. Army of Darkness Ash, not Evil Dead Ash. I mean, Ethan was kinda Evil Dead Ash already. You know what, this was a bad comparison, let's move on. The game's producer, Masato Kumazawa, told PlayStation,
Fear is something players tend to grow accustomed to over time, but with this title, we've been more conscious than ever about maintaining a sense of tension throughout the experience.
Grace's combat is the tension. She's got a handgun, the Requiem, a Molotov cocktail, and eventually acid at the very end of the game. Even Ethan got a shotgun. Leon's monster-killing dong gun might seem like a security blanket, but it's a while before you get extra ammunition for it. And that ammo is hidden behind drawers to lockpick or safes to crack. For the majority of Grace's playtime, she might as well not have it, and when she finally does pull the trigger, she's more scared of the gun than the evil. Her nerves are mechanical. Aiming has a massive sway that's exacerbated by the erratic wobbling of zombies. If you explore enough and drug her up with stabilizers, that sway eventually stops. The player is encouraged to take ownership of her growth from survival horror newbie to survival horror hero. Her attacks have agonizing waiting periods that enhance micro-tension. For example, throwing a Molotov cocktail has a lengthy animation where she lights it, leans back, and lobs it. By the time it hits the ground, an enemy's bloody moved, and if you aim it in front of them to try and get ahead of that movement, you might accidentally burn Grace. The go-to strategy is to save up the glass jars she can find, lob them at a zombie's head, push them over, and slash at them with a knife. Works every time. Except when the knife breaks. Grace will get grabbed a lot because zombies have big wide swings that make pushing past them tricky. This is something that unfortunately translates to Leon's gameplay too and isn't quite as effective there because he's supposed to be the resident badass that runs into the thick of things. They all get a burst of energy as they close the gap. The difference is, if you're playing as Grace, you're not supposed to let them get close enough to lunge. If and when that happens anyway, your saving Grace is a self-defense weapon, harking back to the Resi 1 and Resi 2 remakes. Makeshift knives are your best friend, but their durability is always crap, and even if it isn't, you need to kill the zombie you used it on if you want to retrieve it. Paranoia comes from the varied health pools. If you decide to engage, you don't know how much ammunition you'll spend, even if you make every shot count. The rush comes from taking down a zombie that keeps blocking your path, confirmed majestically by the blood that pools under them, just like in Resi 1. But the fear comes from realizing you've not got the resources to do it again. If you do run low on bullets though, you can always hope you've got God's favorite syringe, a hemolytic injector. They're gooey, violent finishing moves or stealth takedowns. Expensive to make, but worth it. In fact, 3 of these can take down Chunk. If you use one, it stops a zombie mutating and coming back stronger. Grace is supposed to play things quiet. She's not an aggressive combatant. The power of the hemolytic injector is that it lets you finally take control of a space. You can be secure in what's dead, what's definitely dead, and the fact you've still got ammo on you for when you lose control of a situation. Something that happens repeatedly in the basement.
Calm down. Grace? Yeah, we gotta get out of here.
The hemolytic injectors are tied directly to one of Requiem's best ideas, the blood economy. When we reach the East Wing, we'll find a blood collector that can slurp out of buckets or the corpses of some zombies. Bizarrely, and adding to Resi's grotesque sense of whimsy, blood is our go-to crafting resource. Grace needs to engage with the violence, turn it into a strategy, prove that blood is thicker than firepower. Almost everything comes from it. Bullets, medical injectors, hell, even our ink ribbons are actually blood ribbons now. Speaking to Game Informer, Koshi Nakanishi said,
"In lots of RA games, there's always a lot of blood in the environment, right? So the first question that kind of led to that system was, is there any way to implement that element into the actual gameplay? As for the intention behind that mechanic, it was to add another layer of player choice. So, for instance, yes, there's always the choice of running away or fighting the enemy, but knowing that you can possibly collect blood from them gives you another incentive.
It complements the series' famous resource management, sets up optional backtracking, and lets Grace grow stronger through rigor. In an uncontrollable situation, like the Rhodes Hill outbreak, finding control is important. Choosing when to find and when to hide, when to lure a zombie into a trap, and when to let them go about their business. When to make an ink ribbon because it's been a while since you saved, and when to make a permanent upgrade or a blood bomb. In the basement, I had 63 handgun bullets at one point, but I could trace the path to how I got there. I was extra cautious, I only attacked when I had to, and I poured all of my blood into crafting more. Leon's inventory and HUD pulls from Resident Evil 4, a clear health bar, a huge attaché case. Grace's pulls from early Resi. Her damage is locked into 3 states: fine, cautious, and danger. The vagueness of that information adds uncertainty and paranoia during and after fights. A small number of inventory slots means a lot of resource juggling and a lot of returning to the safe room to dump stuff in the item box. Keys and puzzle pieces aren't papped off to a separate screen like in Resident Evil Village. Now they clog up space. Antique coins, our upgrade currency, do the same thing. Pieces of scrap don't stack, they each take up a square, and most cruel of all, the blood collector also fills up one of those slots. Realistically, the blood collector is a necessary item for survival, especially on a first playthrough. You need it if you're going to suck up the plasma and craft stuff. That means that when Grace finds it, it becomes a frustrator and a liberator. Nothing in Resident Evil is ever free. Thankfully, you can discard items whenever you like, but they disappear from the world. This isn't a system like with Resident Evil 0, where you can come back and grab what you dropped later. To help, you can combine herbs and ammo even if your inventory's full, but crafting is excluded from that. The game giveth, and the game taketh away. Surprisingly, classic difficulty is quite generous with key resources, specifically the antique coins that let Grace buy upgrades and lockpicks that lead to rare metal to craft ammo for the Requiem. It's not egregious and certainly doesn't kill the weight of the system, but it stands out because previous Resi titles have always been far more strict with their important items. I had 5 spare coins and a lockpick by the time I left Rhodes, and I unlocked everything. The importance of resource management does not mean that combat is disincentivized. Grace is terrified, not helpless, and killing something might give us a reward. The chef is born from my deepest nightmares, but when I overcame him, he dropped a key to the pantry. If you kill Chunk, he drops an increasingly powerful charm. The ratio's off, Leon gets 5 and Grace gets 2, but they come with boons useful to both of our heroes. Leon can whack them onto the end of a weapon and forget about it. Grace needs to be choosy because if you equip it, it takes up an inventory slot. Stakeout Takeout, for example, increases knife durability. They're never just given to you. You need to find them by exploring or killing an optional monster. Down here in the basement, the girl is the least of our worries. Grace's backpack's the true villain here. 3 batteries are needed to open Emily's cell. That's 3 inventory slots that get clogged up if you don't juggle them properly. That restrictiveness means that the best way to make it out alive is by dumping them around the level. It forces backtracking, meaning it's more likely you'll walk into the girl's spindly clawed hands. It's filthy, blood-curdling stress, manifested as game design. When Emily and Grace make it out of the basement and finally unlock the courtyard door, a Hail Mary waits in the form of a chopper and a gammy leg.
That your kid?
What?
This? Old war wound. I can't run away even if I wanted to.
Nobody knows why Harry Reid is here, but he's a helicopter pilot that can get us the hell out of Dodge. He's hurt his leg, but promises it's just an old war wound. He'll look after Emily if Grace grabs the key from Victor's private cabin. Out of the frying pan, into the secret lab. Blood is the glue that brings Requiem's horror together. It differentiates its gore. Resident Evil 2 and 4's remakes, for example, were sticky and stringy in their violence. Requiem gushes, splatters, and glops. Blood science is what makes its zombies and mutants feel fresh. Resi's famous for its wide variety of monsters, and on the whole, this game struggles to keep up with that variety. But in Rhodes Hill, there's a blood bank of creatures to face. It all ties thematically back to Grace's focus on generational trauma. Gideon is after her because he thinks her blood, her genetic makeup, ties back to the generations that started it all. He thinks her bloodline is the key to Elpis.
All tests have come back positive. I can confirm that she is indeed the one that we've been searching for.
Gideon's research facility branches off Rhodes Hill. A secret elevator the size of a room drops her down into the bowels of his madness. We hear him on the phone to a mysterious new name, Zeno, promising him that Grace is the one they've been searching for. There's a quiet, vulnerable moment where he thinks no one is listening and starts babbling away. "I've done it," he gasps in disbelief. It's insane, but there's a pity to it. It's the sound of someone who doubted himself. Self-doubt is a new genome for a Resi villain. It's human, and that humanity is pumped into the infected as well. The walking not quite dead are defined by archetypes. A chef, cleaner, doctor, patient. They have unique characteristics that make them feel unpredictable at first and later become part of Grace's strategy if we can look past the fear. One of the zombies shambles from light switch to light switch, gurgling that you need to follow the rules, that the lights need to stay off. Are you paying the energy bill? Didn't think so, I've never felt more seen. If you mess with the light switch, you'll stagger over and raggedly thrash against it, and you can use that to move him out of the way if your Grace is focused on stealth. The cleaners will follow a trail of mess. If you paint a room with the guts of other monsters, they'll wail and scramble over, trying to mop it away with a cloth, but sadly just spreading it around. The chef effectively acts as a roaming mini-boss. He's hunting for meat to chop with his blade, whether it's in the kitchen or the dining room. If you leave him alive, his wandering eventually takes him to the hall outside cold storage, like he can smell the organs lying on the other side of the door. In a twisted way, you slowly build relationships with these zombies. The patient in the East Wing Lounge has ear-piercing sound design, but he's our best friend if we lead other zombies into his path. Putting him down felt tragic, like saying goodbye to a terrifying family member. There are 2 singers that can stun Grace with a banshee wail. Eileen Zimmerman and Selena Corey were competitive in life and equally as competitive in death. Eileen was unwell before, but Gideon's staff severed her link to sanity through their deranged experiments. A file reads, "The surgical removal of some cranial nerves resulted in a type of histrionic personality disorder that can only be described as main character syndrome. The patient continues to wander around the care center, singing." Main character syndrome? Where'd you get your degree? TikTok? Everything from their personalities, weapons, defense, and speed is different. Some, like the cleaner, run wildly from room to room. Others, like the dinner guests, flop through broken windows or tumble over tables. It means they never get stale, they just get more interesting the more time that you spend with them. A zombie in the bar is generally unremarkable, but he grabs bottles off tables and throws them. Another wields a knife grabbed from the dining room. In the novel, This Book is Full of Spiders, Jason Pargin, writing as David Wong, it makes sense when you read it, trust me, writes, "There are really only two kinds of monsters in the world, breeders and non-breeders. For instance, Frankenstein's monster would fall into the second category. He's a freak, a singular being. Once you kill him, he's gone. Problem solved. The breeders are an exponentially bigger problem. Take zombies. Breeding is all they do. They are basically walking epidemics and are the worst of the worst case scenario because such a creature could, hypothetically, wipe out civilization. Are Requiem zombies breeders? The only time we see someone turn into one is after Gideon injects them with the virus. It's unclear if the infection spreads through biting. We see numerous corpses that don't resurrect in Remwood and the care center. Grace is bitten and she doesn't turn, though perhaps Victor Gideon cured her when he brought her to the care center. T-virus vaccines are dime a dozen in 2026. For chunks of the game, they're not treated like a mass breeding amorphous blob to be mowed down. One of the things that helps that is how intimate the violence is. Limbs do blow off, like in RE2, especially under the weight of Leon's firepower, but the focus is generally on faces to keep that human element. Teeth fall out, noses are chewed off. One of the singers loses half her mouth if you shoot her in the face. That emphasis makes the detail nauseating. The cleaner has spent an hour smashing her head into a mirror, so as she creeps around a corner, shards of glass are stuck in her eyes and cheeks. What exactly was Gideon doing? What makes his virus different? Like the chef, singer, cleaner, doctor all display, memory is the key. Oswell Spencer looked at blood flies to see how memory can be passed genetically between creatures. If the T-virus can make cells regenerate, perhaps it can be used as a catalyst to regenerate blood memories too. Long dormant parts of your psyche could be passed from person to person. There's already a foundation for this in the wider series. Alex Wesker was able to transfer her personality into Natalia Corda in Resident Evil Revelations 2, but that knowledge was hidden from Spencer and his cronies. In Resi 6, the C-virus transformed Carla Radames into a clone of Ada Wong, but her personality was erratic and melty. Requiem returns to cloning a few times, something that might explain why, inexplicably, there are two identical chefs in Rhodes Hill, but it seems Gideon hasn't cracked the code on memory transference yet. His zombies turn quick. The outbreak happens almost immediately. This wasn't a slow, festering crawl like we've seen in the past. The T-virus has mutated into something new, Raccoon City Syndrome, and it seems that in his research facility, Gideon has been combining RCS with the T-virus. We see chambers with massive containers full of blood. That blood is being pumped slowly into our classic T-virus zombies. This new breed are effectively double infected, turning into something new. Unfortunately, his new strain isn't given a name, something that speaks to the game's general problem with information. Perhaps it's because Gideon is so lost in Spencer's shadow that he doesn't feel like he has the right to name a new strain of his master's virus. Because the care center's zombies are reliving their last moments, we see their essence corrupted by the virus. The doctors and surgeons were psychopathic, so they greedily hunt for us. Others, the victims, are sympathetic, so their dying moments are given to pleading and warnings of danger. Some tell Grace to run. Others question why this is happening. The Jackson brothers are trapped in their own personal hells. Thomas and Timothy Jackson, or Chunk as the game calls them, are victims of experimentation driven out of curiosity. The satiety center of their brain was suppressed, meaning they don't feel fulfilled, no matter how much they eat. Speaking to Polygon, Koshi Nakanishi talked about the thought process that went into their design.
Basically, from the very start of the design for Chunk, we had one concept, and that was just big. Very large, very huge. However, looking at past enemies or past Resident Evil titles, there are many large enemies. So the question was, how do we make this feel fresh and different? The answer the development team landed on was they would place him in a very narrow passageway. As he's moving through the hallways, he's actually scrunched up and he's trying to squeeze through the very small areas.
Chunk is dominated by hunger and pain. He's the most effective jump scare in the whole game, cranking up the terror just when Grace was starting to understand Rhodes Hill. He smashes through rooms and completely fills a hallway. Dead grey skin, broken teeth, and puffed eyeballs show that his size isn't limited to his gut. He is slowly inflating. The sheer scale of him means he can't get into smaller rooms, but he can destroy doors, breaking down crucial barriers that Grace can use to avoid zombies or break their line of sight.
Stop laughing!
He roars as he paws at Grace.
Leave me alone!
His brother has been cast into the attic, slowly feeding on any zombie stupid enough to enter his lair. If Thomas throws Grace into a panic, Timothy is fodder for Leon.
Who is she?
Oh, this is Emily. Help me, I can't stop the bleeding.
Hey, look at me. We're gonna be okay.
The chopper was a waste of time. Zombies bring it down in a nearby churchyard, and as Grace tries to escape, Leon covers her. Emily's hurt. Monsters are flooding in, but he makes a point of stopping everything to reassure her, to tell her that everything's going to be okay, idly double-tapping zombies as he does. If Requiem focuses on the humanity of its monsters, does that sharpen or dullen Leon's characterization? His quips aren't like the sarcasm of Resident Evil 4. There, his jokes were a coping mechanism that often appeared after a fight. Here, they happen during the horror to show his confidence, and are regularly at the expense of those he's killing. Happy people live longer, he grunts as he guns down a blind infected patient. I think I want a second opinion, he says, eyeing up a bloody chainsaw. It's cockiness, sure, but it's mainly disassociation. Leon is tired when Requiem kicks off. He's cynical. He copes with the brutality of what he's seen by ignoring that voice in his head that tells him these were once people. It's a dark turn for his character that eventually pays off in a clumsy but meaningful way. One thing after another, he moans wearily, staring down his first blister head. Blister heads are cousins of Resident Evil 1's Crimson Heads. Both undergo V-Act, virus activation after death. If you don't destroy the head of a zombie, they come back to life tougher, faster, with sharpened claws, fanged teeth, and an extended tongue. Because Crimson Heads were infected with the Epsilon strain of the T-virus, they could even mutate further, transforming into lickers. Their skin would crust and harden, physiology that explained why they were harder to kill. Blister heads are slightly different because they're not infected with Epsilon, they're infected with Gideon's new strain, but the terror remains. They don't crust. Instead, a huge fatty tumor erupts from their head, all the better to absorb bullets with. They look painful, like even a light press on their bulbous flesh would make them shriek. They tie back to that emphasis on blood and take a gazillion shots for Grace. That's maths. Popping the head or hemolytic poison destroys the V-Act cells inside, so blister heads become a key part of Grace's resource management. Are you going to craft that poison so the zombie you killed doesn't transform? Or are you going to cross your fingers and save your blood? Hope that it won't come back. A blister born is what happens when a blister head is left to evolve further. Their metabolism changes, and that tumor that engulfs the head spreads to gooey cysts all over its body. The only way to kill them is by targeting those cysts, but if other zombies are nearby, the blisterborn will accelerate their mutation, forcing them to resurrect and evolve. They add pressure, something downright necessary for Leon's sections because it's absent everywhere else. Truthfully, it's a shame that they're not used more often, one of many great ideas that are limited to tiny portions of the game. One of those portions is here, as Leon covers Grace's ass.
Dead end. Can't let that thing hurt her.
We retreat with Emily. She's in a bad way. Echoes of Claire and Sherry return. One last obstacle stands between us and escape from Rhodes Hill. The girl. Subject 170, aka the girl, started life much smaller. Over time, Capcom found that she wasn't imposing enough, so her limbs grew disproportionately and her face became haggard. Her mouth was stretched out to contain her massive teeth, something that makes her kills look like Saturn devouring his son. She's terrifying because she responds to the game's flexibility. At the start, you can move this medical table in a way that stops her from detecting you. If you try to use it to block her, she'll kick it into Grace, lopping off health. Her childishness is still there, shown through the dolls that she collects. When she captured Emily and brought her into the basement, the implication was that she just wanted to be near her friend. They're both clones, but she's not scared anymore. Now, she lurks in the walls, the ceiling, and underground. Her threat comes from her speed, her sound design, but specifically from the fact that she cannot be contained by her creators. Gideon sent a team to capture and kill her. Their bodies are eaten by rats by the time Grace finds them. Her name is Marie, and she wants to play a game. It's the closest thing Grace gets to a boss fight. Just like every encounter with the girl, our focus is light. We can't hurt her, but we can stagger her with the Requiem and Molotov cocktails. I sure hope you've been saving your ammo. It follows peaks and valleys of tension and catharsis. Through this fight, Grace evolves from prey to predator because she's slowly illuminating the arena. The girl starts to get scared of us. When the lights come on in one section, it feels like we're backing her into a corner, a monster to be conquered, to be feared no longer. Daylight melts her away, gone for good. But Grace isn't rewarded for her bravery. We took too long. Emily is dead.
I wanted to save her!
You don't understand.
No, I never would have escaped without her. This is all my fault. Again.
This is not Claire Redfield and Sherry Birkin. This is something else. Something depressing. Grace is Claire without the grit, without the Redfield sisu, without the luck. She doesn't embrace her role as a new Resident Evil protagonist. She gives up. She refuses to harness that generational trauma and carry the torch. Instead, she leaves Leon, walks out to the facility, and chooses to stop fighting. It's too much. This is incredibly powerful because just like Gideon's self-doubt and the intimacy of the zombies, it's new for Resident Evil. Resi heroes don't just give up. They fight on, always. Sometimes because they're forced to, but often because the horror changes them. In Resi, you mutate or die. Grace finds a third option: surrender. Emily's death is short-lived. The virus mutates her, staggering through a harrowing new monster design, a toothy cocoon. Leon puts her down, but she's incapable of hurting us here. She's too busy fighting. Emily's evolution is strange because a lot of work went into making her as disgusting and tragic as possible, but this creature never returns. It's not an enemy type, nor present through gameplay. That's because the monster variety plummets from this point on. Requiem stops being interested in bizarre evolutions, new viruses, and instead devolves into bringing back old favorites. The second half of the game gets 5 new monsters, 4 of which are recycled from elsewhere in the series, and 3 of which are one-off boss encounters. Everything you need to know about how Requiem approaches its monsters from this point on can be found in how it labels liquors. When they returned in Resident Evil 5, they were designated beta liquors. Their designs were altered from the original because they were manufactured, no longer a freak accident. They were stockier, so the hitbox was larger. They hunted in packs, so that Chris and Sheva could gun down dozens of them at once. Since the fall of Tricell, the Connections have experimented further, supposedly making a brand new breed called Beta 2. Say what you like about Umbrella, but at least their names were imaginative. Their behavior hasn't changed. They still hunt in packs. They're still blind. But now we can capitalize on their exposed brains with sulfuric acid. It's a great, if temporary, bit of gameplay for Grace because the acid works slowly if you don't hit a liquor at point blank range. They take 10 seconds to die. That's plenty of time for them to cut us in two. Garm's namesake is Norse, lending again to the game's emphasis on mythology. Biologically, they derive from Umbrella's Cerberus, another mythical name just from a different pantheon. Where Cerberus were effectively zombie dogs, these are wolves, created by the Connections to be sold on the black market. Their speed and snarl are their weapons, with exaggerated mouths that are too large for their faces. They're a gimmick. They appear for one on-rails chase and are never seen again, something shared by the other 2 monsters left on this list. Did you know that plants have memories? For some, it's a response to environmental stimuli that carries past that stimuli. For others, like Venus flytraps, it's because of calcium concentration. Whether or not Plant 43 remembers Leon is up for debate, but it's back and it's mad. It seems that herbicide and a bomb weren't enough to kill it completely back in Resident Evil 2. When the Connections moved into Raccoon City, they found seedlings and tried to bring it in for further study. It got free and has spread like a weed in a huge crater. It's a short build-up to a furious boss fight waiting at the entrance to the ARC facility. Bulletproof bulbs lurk and wait before dashing out of the shadows. Thick vines have blackened in the shade of the crater. It dies with a scream. The Titan Spinner finally answers a question I've been asking since 2019. What would a Resident Evil spider look like in the RE engine? It turns out that the answer is, predictably, fantastic. Its gargantuan size makes Resident Evil 1's Black Tiger look like a toddler. The fur of its legs shake under each rumbling step. The boss fight breeds paranoia because it keeps disappearing from the arena, scuttling around on the outside of the building and bursting through windows to jump Leon. It spawns babies that are more of a hazard than an enemy type, but a surefire way to waste ammo while we try to scan the rubble for pincers, eyes, and legs. Not much is known about why it's here or where it came from, but it's the standout moment in the second half of the game. You could argue that Titans come from radiation. Take a spider bioweapon and leave it running through the ruins of Raccoon for 2 decades, this is what you get. But the bomb was never nuclear in any Resident Evil game. It's one of the things that's been consistent regardless of what title you're playing. It was thermobaric, no radiation. That means the Titan Spinner is either an old spider that's just mutated due to the T-virus, or something new unleashed by the Connections. That is as solid an excuse as you need for why there are monsters in Raccoon, and would be an easy, hand-wavy way to explain any cool new threats wandering through the desolation. The Connections made them and deployed them to fight off the many different groups investigating the aftermath. Requiem doesn't seize that opportunity though, so Raccoon is made up of zombies and, zombies. It does impact Leon's section. A lot of comparisons have been made between Requiem and Resident Evil 4, but 4, 5, and especially 6 understood that when action takes center stage in this series, you need a wide variety of monsters to keep things interesting. If the bioweapons are just fodder to gun down with a machine gun, you need to shake things up or the horror aesthetic gets stale. Grace's half gets away with relying so heavily on zombies because they're intimate encounters full of personality and psychological complexity. Leon's stumbles because they stop being monsters and turn into an enemy type, spawning and respawning from dirt. But Raccoon City isn't where the game becomes less interesting. That honor is reserved for 5 minutes before we go there. The reveal of our second villain.
Raccoon City. You're the reason for its destruction, but you're also the key to building a brave new world.
Battered, bruised, and defeated, Grace walks out of the processing facility and into the arms of Victor Gideon. He says she's important. All she has left is to find out why. But Gideon isn't alone. Our end of chapter stinger reveals Zeno, and we see that he looks just like Albert Wesker. In fact, Craig Bernatowski, Wesker's actor in Resident Evil 4 Remake, plays him, and we'll soon see that this character is only as good as his fancy little earring. Just like the Lickers, just like Plant 43, just like the Spider and the eventual Tyrant, he is here to jangle like a set of keys in front of a bemused baby. So, let's finally talk about Raccoon City. The city thrums, the city pounds, the city's got a hollow sound. Its guts have been scooped out and splattered on the walls. Stop me if you've heard this one before. So many things from the original are still here, sometimes faithfully, sometimes mutated, sometimes mangled beyond recognition. But the city isn't a space to learn, or conquer, or consider. It's just a corridor dressed as a tragedy. Here's something interesting that Masato Kumazawa told Press Start at the end of 2025.
Before Requiem, we were making an open-world multiplayer Resident Evil game. The horror part was very mild, but we made a game that was fun to play. We looked deeply into this game and wondered if a fan of the franchise would really like this, and decided they probably wouldn't enjoy it as much. That's the reason we turned it back into single player, but there are some remaining elements of the open world game in Requiem.
That shouldn't surprise anyone. Our return to Raccoon City feels like it was stitched into the middle of the story, and the entire second half of Requiem feels patchwork. Resident Evil's 30th anniversary game brings us back to the city that started it all, just without the magical realism, the freaky monsters, the fantastical puzzles, or the weirdness that makes that city so iconic. Hell is empty, but none of the devils are here.
Okay, Sherry, I've hit the barricade. Looks like someone else was here first, and they were planning on busting their way in.
A huge military wall blocks off the center of the city, set up for two reasons. The first is to contain any lingering infected not wiped out by the blast, buried under the dirt. The second is one of Requiem's big twists. The government dropped that bomb to keep the Ark a secret. Oswell Spencer's Uber Lab. The BSAA have been here already. They set up a bomb to blow through that wall. Our time here is dominated by an extensive hunt for 3 detonator parts so we can finish the job, wading through the rubble. So, welcome to Raccoon, gaming's most famous city. Here, we have such iconic landmarks as a warehouse, a sewer, a water processing center, a subway, a parking lot, a gas station, some rooftops, more subway tunnels, an indiscriminate skyscraper, even more subway tunnels. Unfortunately, that fantastic puzzle box design evaporates once we reach Raccoon. Aside from the lovely but optional scavenger hunts in the RPD, Leon's half casts riddles and head scratchers aside. It doesn't matter what you think of Rhodes Hill's puzzles, the second act doesn't even try. His campaign in Resident Evil 6 had more puzzles than his section in Requiem. Collecting 3 parts of a bomb detonator is an extended fetch quest, not a traditional Resi key hunt with layers and stages. But ultimately, our adventure defaults to action, to noise, and to shooting. Puzzles are treated less like essential ingredients to the Resident Evil recipe, and more like an afterthought. Briefly indulged and quickly discarded. You can backtrack and hunt for secrets in Raccoon, but why would you? At one point I found a rusty crank and remembered I could use that crank to open an optional area, a fenced off alleyway. I went to that alleyway, used the crank, and found a zombie and some ammo. Big whoop. There's no secret, no cool weapon, not even something to read. Aside from the RPD, the city severely lacks in lore. There's no flavor text. Every single thing we can read is in service to the main objective or an item that sits on the golden path. All of those documents and memos are related to the BSAA's attempts to breach the wall. That means it's dominated by clinical military speak and lacks personality. Even 3 Make's UBCS leaflets had a fuck yeah hoorah tone that comically contrasted their gory deaths.
Listen up, Pipsqueak.
A UBCS memo reads,
"Give those zombies something to eat. Just don't end up as dinner. Let's go grab a beer."
You can walk in the shoes of Marvin Branna's daughter, following her final hours and reading the notes she left behind before she died. They are tragic and heartbreaking, ending with a quiet, haunting image of a child's shoes, discarded in an alley. One of Umbrella's victims takes center stage for a short but memorable moment. But that's locked behind the deluxe edition, so dry your eyes and pay up, big boy. Raccoon being rubble and Leon being an action hero aren't excuses for the magic to be gone. Perhaps the connections set up some bizarre puzzles as obstacles for the BSAA. Perhaps Leon would need to work through an interesting single location on the outskirts of the city, rather than wandering through a couple of streets. Rumours drooled all over the internet before Requiem's release. Fans wondered what iconic locations we'd see again now that we're returning to Raccoon City. Maybe Capcom would finally let us explore the clock tower in the RE engine as an apology for cutting it from Resident Evil 3. Some even suggested we'd return to the Spencer Mansion. Both of those were inevitably suspect because presumably the blast wiped out the clock tower and we saw the mansion shatter into a million pieces. But considering so many buildings are standing 30 years later, Capcom's options were pretty limitless. Resident Evil Outbreak expands on Raccoon City in a huge way, handing us interesting locations on a silver platter, ones that could be fleshed out properly in a numbered game. We wander through the lobby of the Applegate Hotel, but that's been demoted to one room, nostalgia bait. Same goes for the Raccoon City Zoo. An advertisement for it sits on a weathered billboard. You can even find tickets to it, but it's not an explorable location. Even though its position on the outskirts of the city would make it a perfect, focused setting. Raccoon University doesn't even make a spiritual appearance. Because the city's just a demolition site now, the atmosphere is dry, dusty, and intensely industrial. Just take the music. Comparisons have been made to Resident Evil 4, and outside of the fact this is an RE Engine Leon game, I frankly don't know why. Raccoon's vibe is closer to Resident Evil 5 in almost every significant way. A modern military aesthetic, a lack of weird and wonderful puzzles. The monsters are ghosts, roaming a city that's a shell of its former self, with flat lighting and a beige or grey palette. Christ, even the once green Plant 43 is now coloured in grayscale. It's detached. The streets are littered with zombies that wield guns or wear bulletproof armour because soldiers are the dominant presence, not Raccoon's victims. That armour did nothing to protect the BSAA from Xeno.
So the rumors were true? What rumors? I missed that. I wasn't just about stopping the spread.
Following on from what we learned at the end of Resident Evil Village, the North American contingent of the BSAA has gone rogue, disbanded from the values Chris and Co laid out when they founded it. What precisely that looks like from a politicking perspective is unclear, but it seems they were trying to find the Ark. Xeno got to them first. As Leon follows in his supposedly mysterious footsteps, we pick up that our villains are taking Grace to the ruins of the Raccoon Police Department. Waves of zombies stand between us and our goal, so let's get blasting while we find the last of our detonators. That blasting is the biggest problem here. Not Leon's combat specifically, that's great and has its own section later, but the overemphasis on action that quickly grows stale. It's not outlandish enough to stand on the shoulders of Rezi's more bombastic moments, and not tense enough to complement that mastery of stress and release that characterized the first half of the game. Remember how Resident Evil 4 added Robo Salazar? The humongous statue that came alive and chased Leon to Ramon's boss fight is one of the goofier parts of the original Resident Evil 4. It's wacky, it's out of left field, and it wasn't supposed to be in the game. It turns out that one of the animators thought the game was getting a bit too serious, so the team went back and added some wilder stuff. Requiem doesn't have a Robo Salazar, and it desperately needs it. Koshi Nakanishi told PlayStation,
Leon's parts are still spooky, of course, but I'd say they're more exhilarating than purely horrifying. Overall, this game may be scarier than Resident Evil Village, but it alternates between tension and relief, so it isn't a continuous suffocating experience.
Nakanishi betrays something important there. Leon's section was supposed to still be spooky, so where's the spook? There's no stress, it's all release, and comparisons to RE4 show that people forget that that game harbored tension in really interesting ways. Making Leon a stranger in a strange land was just half of the battle. Horror set pieces broke up his action moments. The Navistadors, giant insects that could camouflage themselves. The Regeneradors, borderline unkillable alien creatures that slithered out of body bags. Traps made the environment lethal, so there were times where your pace had to slow. The tension of 4 isn't here. There are no traps left behind by the BSAA or the connections. No new enemy type that fills that eerie gap left behind by the Regeneradors. Instead, we have a regurgitated chainsaw fight in a gas station, a sequence where zombies shoot mortars at us, and a fantastic yet all too short beat where we're fighting on a toppled skyscraper. The windows are cracked. If our aim is off, we can fall to our doom. Revelations 1, 2, and especially 7's Not a Hero DLC proved that an experienced horror protagonist can still lend to horror gameplay. The claustrophobic environment of the Queen Zenobia was chilling until the game devolved into blasting. Sane Island had fun with its monster mutations to create panicky gameplay through very aggressive enemy design and creatures that could turn invisible. Not a Hero gave us Chris Redfield, the Alpha, a man whose brawn might as well be a superpower, and put him in a haunting dark mine with limited resources that made for stressful play. The mask that Chris wears specifically keeps the tension. It makes him feel well armed and technologically powerful just for the game to quickly strip away that feeling by introducing unexpected hazards. Military tech doesn't need to cut through the horror, it can contribute to it as well. When we pass through contaminated parts of the mine, the UI is treated as a stress mechanic. Lucas releases spores in the tunnels, so when we explore or fight monsters, an oxygen counter ticks down, meaning we need to push through as quickly as possible. That also obscures our vision. It's tough to see, tough to track enemies, and tough to find our path through. Jill, Chris, and Barry's respective badassery didn't wash away the threat, even when they were quipping. What makes Leon any different? When he reaches the RPD, he eventually stops cracking jokes to show how pained he is by coming back here. If you move that switch to the wider city and introduce interesting locations, limited resources, and creative monsters, he can embody his role in Resident Evil 4 again. One man acting as the engine for stress and release. In that same interview with PlayStation, Masato Kumazawa said,
"The concept of the game is addictive fear. The sense of experiencing something terrifying, but you can't help wanting to know what happens next. You're compelled to keep going."
Addictive fear is right, because the first half of the game sets that up nicely, but by the time we reach Leon, I'm jonesing for this horror game to introduce some horror again, and it never does. Lickers are treated like a consolation prize, there for nostalgia, not fear. Arachnophobia can only do so much. In Raccoon, I'm looking for the mechanical tension. I'm looking for Requiem to stop wallowing around in Resident Evils 5 and 6, games that took the series into a future without fear. Requiem wishes it was Resident Evil 4, but it oversteps into its ugly siblings like an Ashford.
I've had enough of you! I know the feeling!
With the bomb built, Leon grabs a motorbike and races on to the center of the city. Victor Gideon intercepts. The control, patience, and role as a looming spectre have vanished. He's now a one-man dastardly and muttly. His trench coat flaps gaily in the wind, shooting a rocket launcher at Leon as we rev up skyscrapers and bunny hop over the Raccoon City crater. It's manic. It's where the action hits an explosive 10, and we never reach this insanity again. Even the Tyrant chase feels tame by comparison. "Shut up, Monty, it's awesome," you say. And yeah, it looks pretty awesome. It's impressive how pretty this interactive cutscene is. Look how much airtime Leon's getting. Look at Victor Gideon absolutely serving as he rides alongside us. A Wild West standoff between hero and villain ends the chapter. He's blown to hell with a gargling laugh. But it stands out and harms the game holistically. If Leon's sequence prior was tense and moody and terrifying, this would sit as a fantastic snap before we reset. The same way his short sequences are treated in Grace's campaign. But that isn't how the game treats this. It's the crazy action bit to finish off the underwhelming action bit. We don't even control the bike aside from some minor swaying, and for the majority of the set piece we can't even do that. This has all the agency of a Resi rail shooter, and if it was plopped into the tone and feeling of Resident Evil 6, I'd be cackling like an idiot because it would feel in step with that game's madness. Jake's upcoming bike chase lets you brute force your way through it because the game adds invisible checkpoints after every single obstacle. It's a mad hodgepodge of insane nonsense. But this is Resident Evil Requiem. I thought the concept of the game was addictive fear.
Look, man, if you don't like the bit where you joust with a mad scientist, I don't know what to tell you.
I know what this sounds like. I know it sounds like I'm being a miserable bastard, but the actual design or placement of the motorbike chase isn't really the big issue I have. It's just a specific example from a wider problem Raccoon City has. A problem that retroactively leaks back into Grace's campaign. But to talk about that, we need to press on to the RPD.
Sherry, I'm in RPD.
It's been a while since you've been back there.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the power of a leitmotif. A recurring piece of music that appears across songs on an album, a film soundtrack, or predominantly in musical theatre. Typically, that motif is associated with a person, location, theme, or feeling. The main notes of Concerning Hobbits appears a few times in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. A cheeky introduction to the simple lives of hobbits later become a reminder of home, of simpler times, or used to emphasize misery. The devastating chorus of I Dreamed a Dream belongs to Fantine in Les Miserables, but other characters borrow it during difficult moments to express their hope or grief. Hell, when making our Resident Evil concept album, link below under the subscribe button, myself and Marina Ryan used leitmotifs a lot to connect disparate threads across games. If placed delicately, deliberately, and with enough build-up, it can help someone retrace emotional steps, seeing stars in a busy night sky. When Leon pushes through the hulking doors of the Raccoon City Police Department, we hear Resident Evil 2's front hall theme twinkling sadly, welcoming him back to where it all started. An RE2 leitmotif returns again when he tells Grace that he's frustrated he couldn't make a difference all those years ago, haunted by the people he failed to save. This is deliberate and delicate. It relies on years of build-up. The police station has fallen into chaos. The main hall has been set up like a medical bay with bloody bandages and gurneys. This was the last refuge for Raccoon City. We learn a couple of further details about Raccoon's victims while here. Marvin Branagh organised a full party for Leon's first day, something we already knew, but Barry Burton helped. In fact, he's the one responsible for the Matilda upgrade we found back in Resident Evil 2, a gift created by gunsmith Robert Kendo. With a lump in his throat, Leon looks at Marvin's desk.
Hey, Lieutenant Brenna. Kennedy. Reporting for duty.
Words that once he looked forward to saying. It hurts because it basks in the RPD's ghostly atmosphere. Retracing our steps from Resident Evil 2 lets Leon retrace his survivor's guilt. It's where the grey colour palette works because the RPD has been drained of everything that made it such a fascinating building before. The artwork was destroyed in the blast. The quirky puzzles now lie useless and abandoned. There are only 2 zombies in here, shambling skeletons that die almost immediately. We need to retrieve the mechanic jack to push through locked gates, literally using a key item from Resi 2 to get past an obstacle in Resi 9. The welcome banner everyone made for him lies in the main hall. Zeno has brought Grace here, but he knows Leon would follow. "You can't save anyone" is scrawled nearby. It's supposed to show Zeno's cruelty, but in reality, it's a metatextual reference to Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's what Jack Krauser told us before he died. Krauser is my favourite boss in the game, just topping Verdugo. It's multi-layered, pulls directly from the original in all the right ways, and acts as a thematic wrapper to Leon's arc. "You can't save anyone," Krauser roars. Leon's fears made manifest, and a fear he'll soon conquer. How does Zeno know what Krauser said? And wait a minute. Is that Tofu creeping outside the window? Tofu, a non-canon special mode from Resi 2, a random joke put in by the devs, is just wandering around the ruins of the RPD. Why is he here? Is this just a world where we have tofu people now? What does that have to do with Leon's somber, depressing story beat? Wait. Wesker's creepy photo of Rebecca Chambers, another joke from Resi 2, is back as well and is part of gameplay. It's an important clue in a scavenger hunt. It's not in his desk anymore, instead it's in a book in the library. That implies Wesker came back here, moved the photo from his desk to a library book after the bomb dropped. This is where Requiem falters. Well, not this specifically, I don't really care about the plot consistency of the Rebecca photo, but it's the feeling that matters. And all this feels like is distracting nostalgia bait, not an examination of Leon's trauma. Man, so much has changed since the last time we were here. Hey, remember Tofu? The RPD is haunting and heartbreaking, but it quickly falls in line with the rest of the game, leaning so heavily on metatextual references and parallels that you start to realize that it's all it has to offer in its second half. Not just throwaway visual gags or out-of-the-box nods, but in story beats, retcons, and gameplay sequences.
So many attempts. So many failures. Such a waste.
Zeno has brought Grace here to look at records from the Raccoon City orphanage. Files that show the orphanage was, in fact, a secret Umbrella cloning center. He believes that Grace comes from that center, and despite that not being the case at all, Grace has a panic attack that flips into a flashback. That sure is lucky for nostalgia. Hey, come closer. Do you remember the orphanage? The Raccoon City orphanage is creepy. Sherry shouldn't be here because no child should be here. It's the most fucked up thing Umbrella's ever done. And we're talking about a company that abducted homeless women to impregnate with monsters. Requiem kinda does. It turns out the children who were there in 1998, the ones tricked into thinking they were about to be adopted and instead dragged off by Umbrella, were the aftermath of cloning and blood experiments. It's 1990. We're not playing as Grace, we're playing as a clone called Chloe as she tries to escape from the children. They're fellow clones categorized as Series 60 who were injected with Oswell Spencer's plasma. It drove them insane, made them murderous. Apparently they had recombinant DNA, Spencer's and someone else's. Zeno and Gideon seem to believe that someone else might be Grace, though if they took 5 seconds to look at the dates on these files, they'd see that's impossible. The experiments date back to before 1990. That would put Grace in her late 30s. The implication is that all of this, experiments that Spencer pushed for, going so far as to visit the orphanage himself to oversee its progress, is the precursor to Victor Gideon's cloning and blood experiments. Playing as Chloe is an on-rails flashback. The Raccoon City orphanage seems to be trying to fill the tension gap that we felt for hours, but it's just regurgitating Sherry's section from Resident Evil 2 Remake with painfully predictable AI and long, over-scripted beats where we do nothing at all. Dead air is the mantra here. Chloe waits under beds and tables as pale, virus-ridden children bang senselessly on duvets. There's a reason speedrunners specifically despise this section because it's not unnerving, all agency is shredded, and it's a slog that doesn't test any particular skill. You can't leave your hiding place until the game prompts you. Chloe physically can't climb out from under the bed. It is, for all intents and purposes, a long, unskippable cutscene. Why does Requiem visit the orphanage? Why does it retroactively change its history and purpose? Why does it feel the need to lore dump through a hide-and-seek sequence that harks back to Sherry's hide-and-seek sequence? The answer is because the orphanage is a leitmotif in a sea of leitmotifs, a reference to another Resident Evil game. Key jangling, member berries, nostalgia bait, whatever phrase you want to use, the idea is the same. Leitmotifs are great when handled delicately, but poured indiscriminately, they start to feel like great individual melodies strung together, out of balance with the music. I wish Requiem would change its tune. Sometimes those references are throwaway. All but one of Leon's charms are metatextual. Ada's teddy bear, Wesker's sunglasses, the BSAA emblem that connects to Piers Niven's. It strengthens your sniper rifle, his go-to weapon. Rest in peace, you beautiful bastard. But elsewhere, you're bombarded with sequences where you can point to something the game is doing and say, oh, this is the Resident Evil insert number here bit. I've already mentioned a few, like the orphanage, the RPD, the Titan spinner, or the bike chase, but there's also a boss fight in a church, like Resident Evil 0, a slow zoom on a set of double doors, like the opening of Resident Evil 1, an unkillable monster that turns out to be a tragic little girl who collects dolls, just like Lisa Trevor in Resident Evil 1 Remake, a secret elevator the size of a room, like in Resident Evil 2. The Ark Laboratory has an identical aesthetic to Nest. A man in a trench coat and hat bumps into Grace, a nod to Mr. X and Barry's scavenger hunt ends with a locker belonging to Jojo, just like the original Resi 2. That locker has old Resident Evil games. We explore the ruins of the subway train that Mikhail blew up in the Stagler gas station ends with it on fire. It's the same one Jill and Carlos fought through and blew up in Resident Evil 3, using a lighter to find your way around, like in Code Veronica. Covering a helpless blonde girl with a sniper rifle, like in Resi 4. The mortar section is just the catapult bit from RE4. The lift section is just the lift section from RE4. The Plant 43 fight is the Ramon Salazar fight from the original Resi 4, right down to his design. When Gideon meets Leon, he immediately overpowers him, hoists him into the air, and chooses not to kill him because he's infected, just like the big cheese. Leon is infected and needs to be saved, just like Resi 4. Hunk appears. Or is it Hunk? Maybe it's a clone. It doesn't matter, because gameplay-wise, this is just the Krauser knife fight. Gunning down dozens of lickers at once, like fighting monsters while waiting on an elevator. The Pandora chamber looks like the Tricell chamber from Resident Evil 5. Xeno is here to look like Albert Wesker. A big fight through zombies that blindly shoot machine guns, just like the zombies. Fighting elite bioweapon soldiers, just like the the girl's arm gets severed, we can put it in our inventory. Alcina Dimitrescu wine returns. That one might be a stretch, but after everything else, can you blame me? Leon's referencing gets so egregious that it retroactively made me look back at Grace's half and wonder how much of the cool design was just a way to reference something. Are blister heads really here because they're an awesome monster idea and a surefire way to keep the tension? Or are they just here to remind us of Crimson Heads? Is the Moon, Star, and Sun puzzle here to show Gideon's fascination with legends that refer to that symbology? Or is it just to reference a puzzle from Resident Evil 1? Is the unicorn door here because it's a mythical beast? Or is it because there's a unicorn medallion in Resident Evil 2? What about the statues around the care center that depict a woman pouring water from a jug? Is that meant to be a water nymph that connects to fables? Or is it just because in the original Resident Evil 2, the statue in the main hall was a woman pouring water from a jug? And of course, the most inevitable reference is the return of an old favorite.
Have fun.
I remember you.
Leon confronts Xeno, tries to wrench Grace away from him, but he's ready for us. A bioweapon is waiting for his cue to enter. T-501. It's got a different designation, but for all intents and purposes, this is Mr. X 2.0. He still wears his trench coat for staying under the radar after all. Glad the disguise is still working for him 30 years later. T-501 is actually the third version of this creature that Leon has fought. In Resident Evil Damnation, he battled one in the Eastern Slav Republic, dodging rockets and taking boulder-sized fists to the gut. That means that Mr. X's return, it doesn't just reference Resident Evil 2, he's waving at the CGI movies as well. During the review period, Resident Evil 2, 4, and 7 weren't the only games people used as a measuring stick for Requiem. Another series, interestingly, got brought into the conversation.
This is the Metal Gear Solid 4 of Resident Evil.
Dude, that was when I was playing this and I was geeking out about stuff. I was like, damn, this is Tim's Metal Gear Solid 4.
It's a comparison that's fair. Metal Gear Solid 4 is the quintessential legacy sequel. That game and Requiem both promised to wrap up loose ends, returned to iconic locations, and ultimately unloaded retcons to try and make it work. Despite the emphasis placed on references, the nostalgia here doesn't hit quite as hard as it did in MGS4 for a couple of reasons. The first is that Metal Gear's return to Shadow Moses was more experimental and ambitious. The camera angles changed to match that game. The musical leitmotifs were more overt to tug at our heartstrings. We were there for longer, and there was a reverence for the emotion of the moment that feels secondary in Requiem. There are no pieces of tofu scaring away ghosts. Instead, Snake's disguised in-universe to look like his younger self. Requiem focuses on the silly nods rather than the ones that would feel like true fan service. Wheeling Mr. X into shot for a scripted chase and half-decent boss fight is one thing, but what would make me gasp was if our time in the RPD used fixed camera angles. The sudden change in perspective would add a new dynamic to being chased because, as we've discussed before, changing camera angles imbue panic. You need to keep reorienting yourself. The second reason Requiem isn't as powerful as MGS4 is out of its control. The distance between the RE2 remake and this game is 7 years. We revisited it again just 5 years ago with Resident Evil 3. There's just one console generation between this RPD and this RPD. When Metal Gear Solid 4 released, it had been 3 console generations since we last saw Shadow Moses. That's not to say that the police station is just key jangling. Leon's return to the RPD flags how much he's grown, even if the gameplay that surrounds it has all been seen before. There was already narrative tension because we got a glimpse of him earlier. A massive hand popped Ben's skull, but in the time since, that tension has grown. In the preceding minutes, we're running on a high because we've finally doused the fire in this hallway. We've solved a puzzle, we're conquering the RPD, and we're about to uncover some new secret or solution. That peak is key because it maximizes the terror of Mr. X's appearance. There's no cutscene, no wrenching of player control. In gameplay, we turn this corner and, without announcement, Mr. X arrives. His brute strength showcased by how deftly he rips the helicopter out of the way. Mr. X was the final boss of Resi 2. His charge attack would destroy us. His evolution in the remake brought stalker enemies back into Capcom's wheelhouse. Now, here he is again, with a charge attack that's parried by Old Man Leon and his hatchet. That growth drizzles through one last stop, a quiet beat that reinforces everything Requiem gets right about how it sees its past, and everything it gets wrong.
You're a cop. You're supposed to know something. How did this happen?
Marvin Branna's death represents Leon's shell shock. He was his superior officer. He should have been a source of comfort, safety, and leadership. Instead, he was the moment Leon realized nobody was coming to help. Robert Kendo was the moment he realized he couldn't save everyone, when he learned that his role as a police officer meant jack shit in the face of the outbreak. His daughter turned into a zombie anyway. The shotgun we find in his shop has no bullets. Presumably Kendo used it on her, and then himself. Finding their remains wraps Leon's guilt. He might be able to kill a tyrant without breaking a sweat, but he worries that it won't make a difference. The game flashes back to those fateful moments in Kendo's shop 2 years ago, but now it looks different.
Terminate. It's my fucking daughter.
Here, Kendo is responding to Ada Wong. She tries to kill Kendo's daughter the second she shambles into view. She doesn't consider it murder, barely considers it killing. Terminate, she says. We need to terminate before she turns. Her line has been removed from the flashback, so this moment is framed like Kendo was responding to Leon. Like he was the one who tried to kill his daughter. Why? Requiem is the Return to Raccoon City game, but its main campaign bends over backwards to ignore 50% of the characters who defined Leon's Raccoon City story. Despite Leon exhaustingly referencing some of their old quips, Claire Redfield and Ada Wong aren't here. Which is fine, they don't need to be, but the game is strange with how it treats them. Outside of a couple of charms, it acts like they never existed. Even though Sherry Birkin is in Leon's ear, even though her relationship to Claire is purposefully paralleled by Grace's relationship with Emily, she never mentions the woman who saved her life in Resident Evil 2. I don't need Ada Wong to be grappling over rooftops and blowing kisses at Leon. In fact, it's quite refreshing to have her absent for one of his games. But the fact nobody says her name, and the fact that she is deleted from flashbacks that revolve around her, means that her role in Leon's arc ends with a deafening silence. Raccoon City Syndrome seems to have affected almost all of the survivors, Claire and Ada included. So for a game that revisits Resi 2 so much, why are they ignored? Why aren't they at least given a file, memo, or off-the-cuff remark to place them in a story that certainly concerns them? Their deletion from the flashbacks means that some of Resident Evil 2's references ring hollow. They're here for fan service, here to be cheered for, here for finger-pointing and 50 things you missed videos on YouTube. You could argue that they're supposed to be here to bring everything full circle, to serve a story about the man that Leon has become. Leon S. Kennedy, monster killer, armed with his product placement watch and his product placement boots and his product placement car. But if that's the case, I don't think the story should remove two people that helped define him. While loading, Requiem throws a bit of advice up on screen.
Shoot the glass of the glowing red pod to release the bioweapon within. Use it to disrupt the elite guards, giving you a chance to attack.
What's notable about this is it's only doable once. The Ark has existed for decades, right in the heart of Raccoon City. It was Oswald Spencer's most important lab, and after he went into hiding, the Connections moved in and took it over. It's heavily guarded, so elite super soldiers are on hand to attack anyone who wanders in. Leon has wandered in.
I'm getting the feeling I'm not wanted around here.
Because they shoot at you, they're tough to kill, but they only appear in 2 combat arenas back to back. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The alternative is stomping through data rooms, gunning down dudes in body armor. But unleashing monsters on soldiers is an interesting variable that makes combat feel unique. It's tutorialized. Hell, it could be a powerful addition to the tension of Grace's sections, but it's relegated to one room and never returns. It is introduced and thrown away so quickly that it feels like a gimmick, not a mechanic to chew on. In fact, the Ark only has 10 elite guards, 11 if you count Hunk, and despite appearing repeatedly in the game's concept art, we never see them again after this part. Leon's combat juggles numerous scenarios, chainsaw duels, sniper cover, numerous boss fights, and soon Raccoon City Syndrome will spread to his heart. That means that intermittently his vision will grow blurry and his aim will sway. We're thrown into new situations with new things to consider often, whether it's the environmental hazard of broken glass or the tight confines of an attic. Requiem's very similar to Resident Evil 6 in that way, where the action throws you from set piece to set piece without settling into a flow state. It's why, before Raccoon City, the singular nature of Leon's gameplay isn't an issue. It isn't until you're asked to invest in him and the space he inhabits that things start to feel scattered. Leon isn't tactical like Grace, lending to his role as a tank. He's all about running headfirst into chaos, weed-whacking with his hatchet. It's why Capcom recommend that you swap to third person with him. He's well equipped, he's more aware of his surroundings than Grace is. She's in her own head, the claustrophobic camera highlights that. Leon's inability to strategize sets him apart from Grace's caution too. Forward planning isn't part of his play because enemies don't spawn until you're in their arena. Sniping from a distance is out of the question. There are rare moments where you can, like this rooftop, but zombies will just respawn when you run into the fray. Leon doesn't have traps or mines to drop like he did in RE4 or Ethan did in Resident Evil Village, so you're forced to just embrace the inevitability that you will get ambushed, and you will need to be reactive rather than proactive. On one hand, that feels like a great foundation for tension, but Ark and Raccoon are so underdeveloped as settings that they just feel like combat arenas strung together. A gorgeous atrium is decorated with statues of man, imagery that hints at genetic engineering. Spencer's secret office is wood-panelled, contrasting the spaceship feeling elsewhere. He tried to bring eugenics into the 21st century, and through the decor of a room, we see how his plans for the future were buried in an archaic past. Aside from those two spaces, Ark is cold and empty. Where are the living quarters, the bathrooms, the kitchens? This isn't Resident Evil 2's Nest, where we got to see what it was like to live in an underground Supermax facility. We get the chance to see Nest as more of a lived-in space. Bunks and a canteen are just off from the entrance. We learn the names of scientists and doctors. One of them, Dr. Wayne, thought he was too clever to die, a detail saved for a B playthrough. ID wristbands dominate our exploration, so we get to learn how they normalized the insane security measures. Ark is functionally dead, despite its importance and the fact the Connections have used it as an active platform to develop bioweapons. Those bioweapons have broken containment before we can even get our bearings. Thankfully, Leon's in a monster-killing mood. The Hatchet is Leon's superpower. It's eternal. Because Leon is so ferocious with it, it will blunt and dim, but thankfully he carries a sharpener, so durability is never an issue. It's not about resource management with him, it's about finding breathing space to stay sharp. We can slash wildly or power up a wide slice, but the damage is negligible and the stun is unreliable. What it's really for is parrying and finishers. Two things that force Leon to get up close and personal with the cracked skin of zombies. If you throw yourself into his mindset, you find a hero that barrels through monsters like they're barely there. It's here you will find the depth. If you time it just right, Leon can cut a licker's tongue off. Deflecting attacks will kill damage, but to truly stun a zombie, you're looking for that crucial perfect parry window. That, or just knocking a zombie down by aiming at the legs, will lead to melee attacks that transition into contextual finishers. If you bash a zombie near a wall, Leon will kick its head into the stone, popping skulls like grapes. Requiem might have turned into an action game, but few action games play like this. It's satisfying because that elastic design we previously discussed returns here. The Hatchet isn't the only way you can parry. Leon's guns can be used for quick-fire takedowns. Aiming and then pulling the trigger lets Leon jam the barrel of his gun into a zombie's mouth. It's a system that pulls from, you guessed it, Resident Evil 6's equally flexible design. There, quick shots were your parry. Now you're forced to aim first, so they're tough to pull off during crowd control. RE6 is determined to make its heroes feel as agile and flexible as possible. We can duck, we can slide, we can roll around on the ground and blast at zombies as they scream in our face. Leon's getting on in years, so he's not nearly as agile as he once was. He can't throw himself around an arena or roll around on the floor anymore. He won't dual wield or do backflips. He's still got the moves, but they've been tempered to reflect his old man energy and the infection that's eating him. That does mean that sometimes the balancing feels off when it comes to speed, like he's searching for his keys when you want to dodge an attack. Leaping out of the way simply isn't an option like it was in Resi 6, and levels aren't designed with the versatility of RE4. There are less ledges to clear or walls to jump over. You need to commit to animations because there's a delay when you want to cancel out of them. You can't fire a weapon unless you've completed the aiming animation. You can't parry unless you've stopped aiming. That means you've got to be a beat ahead during the more intense fights, and it can bring bouts of delicious panic. It's a system that carries over from Resident Evil 4 Remake, and it makes Resi's action keep small levels of pressure. That light touch tension stands out with the BSAA. While Leon's monster variety is disappointing, undead soldiers balance his action nicely. They wear body armor, they're spongy. Lickers might have once again been demoted to victims that flood the barrel of a machine gun, but with the BSAA, you are disincentivized from over-relying on that gun. The spray is so wide that your best bet with these guys is to be precise with your shots. But when we reach Xeno and Grace in Ark, precision is the furthest thing from Leon's mind.
The technology to control another's will already exists, but it's not efficient at infecting others. I believe Spencer solved that with Elpis.
The Pandora Chamber, container of Spencer's greatest achievement, Elpis. Xeno thinks it's the Umbrella Founder's last virus, designed to control human consciousness, but it's all locked behind a password. Enter the wrong code and it all gets destroyed. He's convinced Grace knows the right one. Leon doesn't know what Elpis is, or if Grace even does know the password, but he doesn't care. He lashes out, tries to take Xeno out, and the fight is lost before it can even start. Grace, desperate to save Leon's life, remembers that she played the remake of Resident Evil 4 and puts a gun to her head. We see her resolve because she fights back, resorting to place the knife to her throat to save her rescuer. She knows how valuable she is to the cult. Seizing his chance, Leon grabs Grace and the pair escape, tumbling into waste disposal. As far as rescues go, this has been a middling success. Just like the upgrade system, the BSAA have gamified monster slaying. When Leon arrives in Raccoon City, he finds a bracelet that lets him track kills, racking up points with every zombie downed. It turns combat into the Mercenaries minigame from other Resident Evils. Those points are then spent at BSAA crates to let him upgrade his weapons. Surprisingly, flair isn't rewarded. The way you kill a zombie, be it Hatchet, quickshot, or contextual melee kill, isn't reflected in what you earn. It adds to Leon's detachment. He's not enjoying this. He's not looking for creativity. Unlike in his last two adventures, he's not showing off for anyone. The dead can't applaud. The lack of reward for style reflects his dead-eyed brutality, but it also means that there's no sense of joy or whimsy behind his upgrade system. A mysterious merchant isn't wandering raccoon, picking loot off dead carcasses like in 4 or Village. Instead, the aesthetic of the system is grey. Desaturated military crates flash with monochrome colours. A dull inventory screen greets us every time we check his attaché case. All of our weapons, resources, and ammo are coloured white for the sake of contrast, something that's distinctly unlike Resident Evil 4's colourful inventory system. Despite Requiem really pushing itself as a slick, stylish victory lap for the series, upgrading lacks the iconic charm of the game it most wants to be. At least there's a glimmer of goofiness here. Leon can craft stacked grenades. He does this by taping 2 grenades together like Basil Brush. Boom boom. I'm really proud of that one, I'm not cutting it. Something that almost mitigates this is how upgrades change the look of weapons. Look at this snazzy white handle for the Requiem. Look at my shiny silver coating for the Hatchet. But there isn't enough game to contain real investment in Leon's growth as a character. In-game, he can grab 10 guns, a far cry from Resi 4's 17, and aside from bonus items unlocked out with the game, the variety is limited to just 5 types. No mine thrower, crossbow, or grenade launcher. No grenade types like incendiary bombs. No special ammo like 3 and 7. No bizarre attachments like the Bear Commander in 6. All weapon upgrades have 3 stages, but the 3rd stage is locked behind the metagame challenge point system. I imagine that's because, realistically, that 3rd stage is wholly unnecessary by the time you reach the endgame. Despite all the blasting, it's hard to feel like you've purposefully evolved your Leon when the credits roll. There are no yellow herbs for health boosts. He reached his peak before he climbed out of his Porsche. He still thinks it isn't enough.
It's T-virus. Stage 3 infection.
If you're so sick, why would you come here?
Rescuing Grace has wiped Leon out. Umbrella's curse is spreading fast now, reaching stage 3. In the quiet, he tells her why he came back for her, why he's still here. He spent years whacking moles. He hoped that this time he could make a real difference. Time's running out. He's too weak to go on and the way out of waste disposal is too small for him. Just like how he relied on Ashley, Grace now needs to shoulder the burden. Resident Evil proves that time is indeed a flat circle. Back in 1998, Leon saved Ada from a pile of garbage. Now it's him who needs to be saved. Grace will free him, but considering what happens when she does, I wouldn't say he's free of garbage. And I'm not just talking about the dump. Ho 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 ha 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 ha. There's a belief when it comes to Resident Evil that it is inevitable our final third will be weak compared to the rest of the game. The beautiful, lethal, gothic environment typically vanishes in favour of labs and industrial spaces. The mystery vanishes because we get all of the answers. The focus is on catharsis, not tension, so the spooks start to fade away. And while I understand that take, I don't think it's fair or inevitable. Resident Evil 1 introduced harrowing new monsters in the form of the Chimera, forced a pacing reset through its puzzles, and kept the stress and tension by making the player carry explosive fuel from one end of a dangerous lab to another. Resident Evil 2 did the same thing with keycards, IVs, and liquors that ambush us. Resident Evil 3 had the Dead Factory, a pacey tread through a waste disposal plant with Nemesis waiting at the end. Difficult puzzles lay inside, and some of the toughest monsters in the game roamed the halls. Resident Evil Code Veronica had us work through a copy of the Spencer Mansion, based inside an Arctic facility as we edged closer and closer to Alexia Ashford. Resident Evil 0 had us approaching the Leech Queen while new creatures like lurkers leaped into shot. It split up Billy and Rebecca to keep things tense and used the wet, slick design of the treatment plant to give the illusion of momentum, even when the pacing was slow. The hope was that after everything he's learned, Koshi Nakanishi would finally cauterize the third act problem with RE9. Depressingly, that couldn't be further from the truth. Requiem has the worst ending in the numbered games. Village might feel rushed and tumble into the Chris Redfield show, but at least it had a cool boss design. 7 limps to the finish line because of the way it handles the child trafficker and bioterrorist Mia Winters. I will never forget, and neither should you. But its twist is surprising and its internal logic makes sense. 6 has 4 endings, 3 of which have wild, memorable boss fights and a legitimately touching death. 5 is dedicated to Albert Wesker and rides that rocket straight to the credits, and every game leading up to and including Resident Evil 4 ends with satisfying, mesmerizing catharsis for its characters and gameplay. Not you 3 Remake, I'm talking about the original. Requiem's finale feels like a cartoon of Resident Evil, and this is a series with a lot of cartoonish moments. It makes very little sense, retcons years of history without fully committing to itself, and delivers a forgettable final boss because it gloms on to fan service.
My research opened Pandora's box, unleashing disaster upon the world.
Except Elpis, the goddess of hope.
Lucky for the plot, Grace stuffed her mother's memory disk up her ass at the start of the game. It couldn't have been her pocket because it would have fallen out when Gideon dangled her upside down. It couldn't have been her bra because that had to be removed when she was bandaged up. Shut up, I'm not overthinking this, you're overthinking this. I'm teasing, but obviously that is not an issue. It's classic Resident Evil nonsense that belongs in the pantheon of Resident Evil nonsense. There's an intrinsic understanding among fans that a deep, psychologically rich story is not the point of this franchise. We find Resident Evil's heart by imprinting onto its looser parts, not by uncovering the trauma of its horror like with, say, Silent Hill. I'd go so far as to say it's almost a badge of honor for a Resi game to be kitschy. Contrary to popular belief, the series never went off the rails with its storytelling. It was never on track in the first place. It was always full of plot holes and inconsistencies and messy details, and doubly contrary to popular belief, this wasn't just because of translation issues and B-movie storytelling. It has become a part of Resident Evil's identity. When someone wipes away plot holes and narrative inconsistencies with, it's a Resident Evil game, that is a poorly phrased but very justifiable explanation for why this sort of shit does not matter when assessing the quality of a new entry in the franchise. What's on the disc, however, is not that. So let's break it down. An interview between Alyssa and Spencer teaches us that Grace is his adopted daughter. Capcom have wanted to make a game where we've played as Spencer's kid since the early days of Resident Evil 4. That game later turned into Devil May Cry, but the story thread is woven back into the series here. We don't know exactly when she was born, but a bit of maths can give us a timeline. She's a baby when Alyssa interviewed Spencer. At the time of this interview, he was in hiding following the outcome of the Raccoon City trials. The trials ended in 2003. Umbrella disbanded at the start of 2004, and Spencer later died in 2006. That means this interview must have taken place between 2004 and 2006. Requiem takes place in 2026, placing Grace at 20 to 22 years old. Before he died, Spencer wrote in his will that Grace was to be given to Alyssa Ashcroft. This means that Grace must be disconnected to the cloning that happened in the Raccoon City orphanage. She's not the original and she's not a clone, no matter what Zeno and Gideon think. All of that was happening back in 1990, and the orphanage was nuked in 1998, at least 5 years before Grace was born. The cloning program might have continued in ARC, but by that point the US government and the connections swept in and took it over. Spencer wouldn't have been able to access it. He was in hiding. Remember? Details aren't shared by him, but the implication is that between 2003 and 2006, Spencer found Grace in a dumpster one day, took pity on her, and decided to care for her. But what about the clones, I hear you ask? That was a whole part of the plot. At first it seemed like Gideon was trying to resurrect Spencer using cloning and blood memories, but then we pivoted completely to the idea that Grace was a clone. You're right, we did do that. But it doesn't matter anymore because we're doing this. Grace isn't special, Ray's parents don't matter, and Neo's not the chosen one. It's like the old man says, she is completely normal, nothing special about her. The entire orphanage flashback has nothing to do with any of this. It was less misdirection and more an outright lie. Grace's memory flickers with Chloe, the orphanage, and the children before we switch to gameplay, but that was just a scene transition. Why was Gideon so convinced that Grace was the special one that he was looking for? He tells Grace that his master made her, implying that he thinks Grace is either Spencer's biological child or a lab experiment that was important to him. He even does blood analysis on her and details his findings in a report. All of her genetic information, quote,
Matches the specified data perfectly.
What's the specified data that Grace matches? It can't be the other clones like Emily because Grace isn't a clone. It can't be Spencer's genetic code because she's not his biological daughter. What pivotal, crucial element made him devise a master plan to capture her? It's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you because there's nothing to foreshadow this reveal. Foreshadowing is a very important component of a good twist, and instead we get hind-shadowing, finger-wagging, lies that are simply proven to be lies because an old man pulls out a baby and says, "Hey look, I found her one day, she's called Grace, I adopted her because I felt bad." It's a symptom of Requiem's information problem, and that information problem shows a non-committal attitude to its reveals.
Where is Chris, anyway?
No idea.
What you sow, you reap, Oswald Spencer says. Isn't that the natural order? Before now, he's loomed over the franchise, appearing in person just once in Resident Evil 5. Despite that single appearance, we've learned broad strokes of his life and intimate details of his cruelty and madness. He has been Umbrella. It all started in his mansion. There, he kidnapped the architect George Trevor and led experiments on his daughter Lisa until 1988. He was a eugenicist with a god complex. In his dying days, he wrote,
I, Oswald E. Spencer, founder of Umbrella, as well as its chief executive officer, hereby proclaim myself as ruler of all mankind. Everyone shall prostrate themselves before me as they once did for the ancient false gods.
Notes and letters are littered throughout the series exploring that. He believed he was part of a superior race of beings who were destined to lead humanity into a new age. Why is he concerned with the natural order of things? In less than 2 years, he will rant about how he's above that natural order.
Ironic, isn't it? For one who has the right to be a god.
The ultimate reveal is that Elpis isn't some super virus that he created in secret, it's a super vaccine. He made it a few years before Raccoon City fell, a biological weapon that would wipe out all other biological weapons that used the progenitor virus as a foundation. T, G, C, and T Veronica would fade from the face of the planet. Lickers, zombies, mutant plants, and more would disappear. Why he made Elpis is unclear, and that lack of clarity casts a shadow over this reveal too. He tells Alyssa that he was wrong, that he's plagued by guilt, that happiness cannot be achieved at the expense of others. Grace describes it as Spencer's atonement for all the evil he brought into the world. He's put his hope on the shoulders of two things: the super cure he made 7 years prior, and the baby girl he adopted. A couple years later, he would retreat to his ancestral castle and pop down to the dungeon so he could torture some monsters. I guess he forgot to bring Elpis with him. In the pit of the castle is a dungeon overflowing with bodies, torture devices, and cages. Zombies are here, but they don't roam, they don't stagger, and they don't resurrect with crimson skin and sharpened nails. They're a hazard, traps that grab us if we get too close without executing them beforehand. A sign that Spencer has been mutilating his victims for a long, long time. Spencer's atonement isn't redemption, and to be fair, the game doesn't particularly try to make that case. But Requiem is, at best, clumsy without handles Spencer's motivation for all of this. It's so murky that it turns him into something he didn't deserve to be, a myth that nobody can define.
It's possible that Spencer's true motivations behind Elpis were peace and redemption,
Grace writes after the credits roll. It's important to note that the game pitches her report as the new canon because it lays out a new history for Resident Evil. It realigns facts, retcons chunks, and moves pieces around.
Having witnessed the horror of the Second World War and the dread of the Cold War, Spencer felt a sense of despair at watching the world repeat the same mistakes. He felt it was his duty to bring about a change in humanity.
Oh, it was the Cold War, was it, Spencer? I thought it was about becoming immortal. Fuck knows where I got that idea from.
I was to become a god.
He's effectively the main character in a horror series that he created. He's the catalyst for every brutality and every fright that we fought. And now, here he is. An old, decrepit, rambling eugenicist relegated to diary entries and a single cutscene. This turn for Spencer goes on to dilute his presence in sins of the series. We always knew that James Marcus invented the T-virus, but it was off the back of Spencer's funding a preliminary research with the progenitor virus. According to Requiem, Marcus wasn't funded by Spencer, but the connections, and the second he got hold of Marcus's research, he started making Elpis while funding T-virus experiments.
In the 1990s,
Grace writes,
the organization became so large that Spencer could no longer fully control it.
Spencer was a man so paranoid he had James Marcus killed because he thought his partner was trying to take over Umbrella. According to Requiem, that paranoia didn't stretch to what was going on in the secret labs he set up all over the world. By the time the government dropped a bomb on Raccoon City, Spencer wasn't a mastermind at the head of a corporation, he was just the fall guy for our real big bads, the Connections. It turns out that they've spent decades infiltrating Umbrella, Tricell, the government, and all our evil orgs, and it's them who have been pulling the strings. Spencer was just a puppet. Oh, and while we're at it, Brandon Bailey, Spencer's protege, isn't the leader of the Connections like Resi7 and Village told us. He's just a cog in the machine. Also, Wesker didn't go rogue during the events of Raccoon City. He was actually just working for the Connections the whole time. Tricell wasn't his idea. It actually predates the Raccoon City outbreak. And while we're at it, the family from Resident Evil 6 is also part of the Connections. Happy anniversary, Resident Evil! Here's a game that rewrites all your lore. Before Requiem, Spencer's characterization was clear, evil, and satisfying in its simplicity. He was so hateable through presence alone that when I guessed Gideon was trying to bring him back to life, I was excited. Finally, a game where we get to punch Oswald Spencer in the face. But what we get instead is a dilution of his evil. His saving grace and creation of Elpis might not redeem him, but is there any catharsis at all to splashing some grey into his inky black ledger years after his death? Emotionally, what does this do for Grace? In the space of 5 minutes, she learns she was not a clone, she was adopted by bioweapons Hitler, and lied to her whole life by Alyssa. She absorbs this knowledge without batting an eye. The game weaponizes its lack of information to make us question if this even is a retcon because it knows it's not satisfying and doesn't align with the only other time that we've seen Spencer. Roll the clip.
I was to become a god.
There's a fan theory that Spencer lied to Alyssa. He created Elpis not out of guilt, but purely out of spite. He saw Umbrella was crumbling around him, saw the wolves at his door, saw traitors profiting from something he discovered, and decided to burn it all down.
Tricell, HCF, the family and Umbrella. Elpis shall bring it all to an end.
He wrote in 1990... something. Because it thrives on uncertainty, Requiem doesn't pledge a specific year, but it doesn't need to for the contradictions to appear. In 2000, he sent Alex Wesker to Sane Island with a mission: use the T-Phobos virus to explore memory transference. Failing to rejuvenate his dying body, it was his Hail Mary in a hunt for immortality. He sent hundreds of test subjects to her. T-Phobos is a strain of the original T-virus. Elpis would destroy that plan. Why would he possibly release it? Well, Grace's report has an answer for that.
While he remained obsessed with the evolution of humanity throughout his later years, most testimonies describe him as nothing but a senile old man.
Any issues that come up, any contradictions, any retcons and dissatisfying rewrites are hand-waved away by that sentence. Spencer flip-flopped between feeling guilty and torturing people in his basement. Well, he was crazy. The creation of Elpis doesn't align with his active projects. Well, that was probably just the dementia talking. Requiem doesn't pick a lane for Spencer's motivation, so as a twist, it's flimsy. There to be grappled with, not embedded. It feels artificial, something plopped in here in service of a last-minute twist about Grace's origin and the MacGuffin we've spent the game hunting for. In isolation, the retcons aren't the issue. At this point, Resi's lore is so convoluted that main story beats might as well be multiple choice. But Requiem is the 30th anniversary game, pitched as tying up loose ends with a vast conspiracy. To quote the marketing, it's a game about endings and beginnings. But no loose ends are sincerely tied up. Instead, the connections are thrown around the same way Metal Gear Solid 4 used nanomachines. Harper J. McIntyre wrote a fascinating article in Kotaku. This is a long quote, but stick with me because it highlights specifically why Requiem worked for so many, and also why it didn't land for me.
Requiem can feel like a desperate best hits collection of fights. Long decayed shamblers, a massive plant beast in the style of the first game's Plant 42, a grey-faced tyrant like Resident Evil 2's iconic pursuer, where Leon systematically uproots the weeds tangling the series' garden. Far from some mere wink-and-nod nostalgia fest, this death drive is reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, a game which similarly tossed series iconography into a blender. The most tenacious of Leon's enemies is the Commander, an enemy soldier who is almost certainly Hunk. Cut for cut, like a surgeon removing cancer or a medieval barber performing a good bleeding, Leon excises this seemingly eternal icon and finally removes one of the final lingering pieces of the past from the series.
Requiem is afraid to commit to itself. It gestures at character arcs. Gameplay-wise, Grace doesn't participate in an ending that is all about her, and pretends to close the book on Umbrella without being clear about the conclusion. Hunk is referenced here, but his presence counters McIntyre's article. It doesn't back it up. Killing a ghost from the past is a fun metaphor, but we don't kill Hunk. When we go back, his body's gone. And even then, the game is so murky about if that even is Hunk that fans are debating if he's a clone or not. It leaves threads dangling and retcons things without rigor or conviction, so it awkwardly leaves the door open for the messy canon to return in the future. The pitch was that this is Leon's final game, but that's not even hinted at here. He doesn't die or retire. The closing scene actually implies he's going to gear up with Chris Redfield sometime soon. Umbrella isn't finished. Not more finished than it was back in Resident Evil 4 when it went bankrupt, or in Resident Evil 5 when its founder died. There are named Umbrella nutters that have just been absorbed into our new evil organization. Brandon Bailey's still out there and a prime named antagonist. Alex Wesker is walking around in a new body, plotting world domination. We've had super vaccines for the T-virus before. Daylight, the T-reagent, Jake Mueller's blood, remember him? Hope that guy's okay. Suddenly writing that Elpis is a super duper vaccine doesn't make its reveal have any more power in the grand scheme of the series. The lack of certainty elsewhere means that when climactic reveals happen, I don't trust that any of them are truly climactic. Go on, chuck money on the roulette table. I give it 3 games tops before a special strain of T manages to subvert Elpis. All Requiem did was absorb the series' silly bits into the connections and pretend like that tidies things up. It doesn't. Fans are so confused by the plot that they are debating key beats, and all of this feels by design. Resi's 30th anniversary doesn't feel like it's screwing the cap on a messy past to bring in a new future. It feels like Capcom chucked the kitchen sink at it and are waiting to see what people cling to. And considering how forgiving people are being of its second half, I assume that means more action and possibly more Leon. Nothing proves my point better than Xeno.
You are nothing but an imitation.
It's over, Victor. The Connections is done with you!
Grace cracks the code. The Ark asks her what the creator desires, and she answers plainly. Hope. Elpis is released, Leon is cured of RCS, and Xeno jabs himself with it, thinking it'll strengthen his superpowers. Without his abilities, he is laid bare. An Albert Wesker imitation that is working for the Connections. His white suit seems to be an attempt to differentiate himself from his originator. He is, in fact, a clone. Or is he? There are a few things that point to this. Victor Gideon bursts into the Ark and literally calls him an imitation for a start, but he's also infected with Raccoon City Syndrome, likely because it lay dormant in Wesker and those genes have carried over. His intense speed and strength show he has powers just like Wesker's. All signs point to a Wesker clone. All signs, that is, except for any textual confirmation, exploration, or explanation about anything. We don't learn a minute of his history, how long he's been alive, how he feels about the original Wesker, or why the Connections even created him in the first place. He's got Wesker's powers, but none of his intrigue. He's a politician. The only thing we categorically learn about him is that he spent the first half of the game off-screen, lobbying the US government. He then donders about Raccoon, lies to Grace, gets the entire plot wrong, and gets his head cut off. You know, if he just googled Pandora's box, he could have avoided all of this. Great villain, everyone. Great representative for your new big bads. He's a walking mystery box without a concrete answer, purely here to make us gasp at the midway point and say, hey, I know that guy. Shockingly, that is the best way to describe Requiem's final boss, too. Victor Gideon is a nemesis. A brand new variant, Nemesis Gamma. It walks, it talks, it has all of its faculties intact. Mostly. Of course a Nemesis is in this game. It's got everything else, so we can't forget those all-important references. Learning that Elpis is a supercure, Gideon's madness runs away with him. He thinks it's brilliant, Spencer's last, defiant act. He thinks bioweapon disarmament will lead to anarchy. Either because he's lost his mind completely, or because he thinks he can change back using Elpis, he decides to let his mutations take over. A two-stage boss fight references the past twice. His first form is a discount William Birkin. We need to run around a shattered lab, careful not to get pinned into corners as he attacks with wide sweeps. His second form is a rehash of the Nemesis fight from Resident Evil 3 Remake. A boss so terrible, they did it twice. Nemesis returns. Still mutating, still shrieking, still pulsing with Umbrella's ambition, the end result of hundreds of experiments, memos, failures, and corpses. Catharsis doesn't come in the form of the rocket launcher, unless you shoot it out of Gideon's hands in his first phase. It's a great way to make the player earn fan service rather than be forced to eat it. The challenge is getting the damn thing to spawn. With Elpis in his veins, Leon's back to his old self, meaning Gideon's a pushover. You might just kill him before he gets a chance to pick it up.
Oh, let's pray Umbrella hasn't left us any more nasty surprises.
I wish we could have saved Emily.
Grace, I didn't hit any of her vitals.
The dynamic duo escape Ark, bringing Elpis into the light and ready to expose Umbrella, the connections, and their ties to the US government. Regardless of the messy closing chapter, regardless of the fact Chris Redfield's goons Deus Ex Machina us out of the ruins, paralleling Resident Evil 7, Leon and Grace's stories have soft and intimate conclusions. Elpis is a catalyst for both of them to complete their arcs. Leon finally got what he wanted. In finding a supercure with Grace, he did make a difference. Not only that, but we see that behind that monster-killing persona, his humanity and sympathy for biohazard victims never went away. When he shot Emily, he purposefully missed her vitals. With Elpis, they can cure her. Grace has helped him renew his faith in the fight. Nobody is too far gone. Grace herself soon adopts Emily, a full-circle moment for the through line of adoptive parents. An orphan cares for an orphan. Requiem is a celebration of its past and an examination of its present. A living wound that bleeds inheritance, history, and hostility. A monster of contradictions, stitched together from ambition, chaos, excess, and explosions, lurching through the ruins of its own franchise. A game made for me. Made for someone that adores the old-school tension of its survival horror origins. Made for someone who can appreciate the catharsis of its action when it's treated like catharsis. Made for someone who drinks the Kool-Aid of its lore and can understand why something as innocuous as the JoJo locker is a fun reference. So why can't I love it? It managed to, once again, shrug off the threat of becoming a live service game. It's the fastest selling entry in the franchise. It celebrates the fact that it's part of the only series of horror games to last 30 years. A series that pushed through an unhinged dip, it has more highs than lows. Its first half explored some clever new frights, and as a package it tried something new, smashing legitimate terror into action that isn't afraid to be action-packed. Ambitiously, it proves why Resident Evil endures, because it keeps experimenting and never lets itself get stale. But Requiem also, inadvertently, forces Resident Evil to a standstill. The fanbase is split in two now, those that don't mind the macro world design of Leon's campaign because his action is fun, and those who wish the whole game kept mining the feeling of Grace's. The game exacerbates that split by smashing the two design philosophies into each other, and if you're like me, you'll slowly stop seeing that as ambitious and instead as compromise. It understands fear, pacing, and trauma in a way that puts it among Resi's best. It proves it decisively with Grace. What it cannot do is trust that fear enough to end on it. Instead, it cushions its conclusions with retcons, legacy villains, and ambiguity so thick it mistakes confusion for depth. It's a game that looks backward with exquisite craft, but refuses to let go. It turns away from the philosophy of Grace and chooses memory over meaning. Leon returns, not to a site of reckoning, but a museum. Raccoon City dies a sixth time. I'm not convinced that it had to.
City's got a hollow sound. Drown it out. Drop a bomb. Call for help. Raccoon City is on lockdown. Authorized personnel only. Hazardous